Good morning out there in Shinerland. I think I'm talking to myself, so I'm gonna go ahead and bring you in early because there's nobody else here right now anyway, and I don't want to stand here and act like an idiot and talk to myself. So this way I can talk and it won't seem funny to nobody. Oh, there's Nicole. Good morning, Nicole. You're the first one here today on The Price is Right. Come on down. Oh, wait, wrong show.
We got the little yodeler guy.
Yeah. Man, Brenda said we're old because she said now hey, Carol, good morning. Said we're old, so we can watch Price is Right if we're at home like old people do. And yesterday it was on, and they gave away $123,000 Audi, an electric Audi. I bet you don't see a lot of electric cars in Wyoming.
No. We see them in the summertime. People are here touristing, doing the tourist thing, and you just don't see them too much like by local people.
Well,
it's hard to pull a horse trailer with a little electric car. So
and I would suspect it could be hard to find a place to plug in if you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I only know of 2 in the entire state.
Plug-ins?
One of them is in Casper, right in the middle of the state, and then one of them is oddly enough in the little town of Wheatland, which is as cowboy a town as you can get. But they got a plug-in. They're right there on I-25, so they're trying to provide a service there. But it's not. They're just not. I don't see them very often, except like again in the summertime.
Yeah. How are you today, Miss Carol? Are you at home or are you out running swimming lesson duty or something? And Nicole, if you're still in here, how are you today? Oh, hey, I can do it. I just learned something else new. I've been learning things, Carol. I've been learning things today. I learned a new way to do slides. I just learned how to do a survey. Yes or no, add option, ask a question, and then you can answer yes or no to take a poll. Did I already say? I probably already said that. I did not know how to do that. I just now found it. Home for now. Lessons canceled. Staff shortage. And I've heard that before a lot lately. They closed down. Was that here? I just either saw a story on the news or maybe it was a local place, but they had to shut their doors after like 50 years or something because they just couldn't they just didn't have any help. So they finally just shut it down, which was a shame. I can't remember what little town that was in. But people used to go there to eat, every day for years, and if not generations. And they were going to stay open till this weekend. And I don't know if they were going to try to find some more help, but they ended up shutting down like Wednesday or something. So I'm sure there's probably old men still going over there every day trying to find their lunch. And they ain't getting any. Which is not funny if you're a hungry old man. Don't get me wrong. But
so they closed that permanent?
Well, that's what they think. I mean, it had been family run and owned for, I think they said 40 or 50 years. And all the locals, ate there. And that's where everybody, if you went to get something for lunch, that's how some farmers and stuff are.
Yeah.
The ones that ride in their truck downtown go to the co-op a couple times a week, and hang out down at the Hardee's for breakfast. And then they go over to this place, to eat lunch, and it's gone.
Well, we can't. We've only got, I'm trying to think. We've got 4 total restaurants in our town.
And that's Kimmer, right?
And that's Kimmer. And they change names and turn around and turn them over. And I mean, we just don't have a lot of options. It's kind of a big deal when your restaurant closes.
Yeah. Where's the Mexican place you were talking about going to?
The Jolly Science,
Where they have the big
it's
wand.
called the El Jaliense is what it's called.
Is that Kimmer?
And my redneck nephew calls it the Jolly Science because that's what it looks like when you read it.
Jolly Science.
And that's in Kimmer, yeah. And it's the most stable of all of our. I mean, it's been there the longest probably, and they've got the big one, and they make a wonderful burritos, and well, all the Mexican food's kind of funny to me. It's just all folded different. It's the same stuff. And I love it, but it's.
I've thought that too. It could be a fry. If it's fried, it's called a chimichanga, which I'm probably not even Mexican really. If it's corn, it's a flauta or something else. And if it's some burrito, I guess burritos can be corn too. But you see a lot of burritos and flour tortillas. So anyway, but I'm like you. Once you get it on the plate, it pretty much looks the same when you cut it open.
But it's tasty.
But it's tasty. I tell you what, there's a couple of little, like small, I'm probably mom and pop kind of Mexican places around here, and one of them we used to eat at when our office was down in Lenore City, and man, they had the best white cheese sauce. I mean, I just love that stuff now because of them. They drizzle it on your rolled up tortillas and I just spread it all over everything because man, that stuff was good. And I don't know I can't find it or know how to make it. I think they were making it, but maybe they were buying it from somebody. Maybe I don't know, but I've yet to be able to find the kind that tastes like what they had. I found a place close to here that's got pretty much the same stuff. It's pretty good, but there's a lot of places trying to make quesadilla or cheese dip of some kind, and it's just lacking something. Of course, some of it's just lacking the heat too. That there's a lot of soft mouths around here. People don't like hot stuff.
Tina's in.
Same food, different name. That's exactly right, Tina. It's to keep us guessing. No glasses on. Do I need to try to can I make the fonts bigger or something? No glasses. Should I talk louder, Tina? I've been doing this for a year now. I got to check my anniversary, but I think I've been on for a little bit over a year. And ever since I started, I've had my microphone set up here on my left on my desk, and you can't see my hand. But anyway, right over here. And it stands up, and it's in front of my other screen. And on my left, I've got two screens. And on this screen is where my YouTube is. And over here, it's the StreamYard, the studio channel or whatever. So when I have my microphone over in front of the YouTube channel, I can't see what's going on. So I move it around and that kind of stuff. And today, again, I've learned, this has been a learning day. I figured out that I could lay the microphone down. So I, bend it over and lay it so it's kind of horizontal to the desktop, and it works just fine, apparently. And it's no longer in my field of view. That's just when you get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you stay up the rest of the day, they'll bean bowl up here gets to working. You get the synapses firing, as my buddy Cottrell used to say. Tina, yeah, Tina, how are you always watching if you don't have glasses on? That would be tough. I went and got me some new, well, I hadn't got them yet, but I went and ordered me some new spectacles Wednesday. Well, they're not going to be here for another 2 weeks. Well, the 9th of March, I think. And man, I'm ready. I'm ready too. My eyes have, actually, she said they hadn't changed that much, but there's a little difference. And we were trying to adjust from my computer screen because that's really, I don't need them out there, but I need them in here. Although I think my stigmatism might be getting just a tiny bit worse. And so I got new glasses coming. The one thing about them, they won't be scratched up. I'm as careful as I try to be with my glasses, and no matter what I buy, scratch resistant stuff to put on them, they still get scratched up. Very carefully, Tina watches. If I had to watch without glasses a lot during the day, I'd probably get car sick sitting here because that's just at my worst focal length is from my end of my nose out to about my computer screens. If it's in there, I mean, I know what I wrote and I still can't really read it. So how's Tina today? Oh, I don't know. I hadn't talked to John in a day or two. I don't know if he's going to be here today or not. I hope he is. I think he might enjoy this conversation. And we will have a formal conversation, folks. I'm just kind of waiting around to see if anybody else showed up. And I had a couple of topics I wanted to bring up. We had Mark wouldn't know this, but I was going to mention Dean. I did tell you this too. Turkey lecturer. His father died a few days ago, and he's I don't know. I can't tell. He put out a thing on Instagram like, here's my Dean's emergency hotline if you need to talk or want to talk. But I got the feeling it was more he was wanting, he was kind of putting it out for, hey, if you're not doing anything, maybe, give me a call or I'll give you a call because I'm thinking he probably needs somebody to talk to, or maybe. And your nose to 20 feet, that's where you're at, Tina. Oh, my goodness. Well, I used to be 15 and 20 or 2015, how it worked. So doctors always said that meant I could see at 20 feet what most people saw at 15. And now I'm 2025. So that's not too big a change. I mean, and I haven't been 2015 or 15, 20 in a few years probably, but I used to be able to see good, and when they'd throw that eye chart up there, I used to love to. They'd say, read the lowest line you can find, and I used to know what it said down at the bottom. And I'd say, Acme Eye Chart Company, New York, New York, and they'd say, no, not that far down. Oh, did he, Carol? I haven't seen that one yet. Hey, John, good morning. We were just talking about you. Were your ears burning?
It was not bad.
Well, no, but they still might have been burning. We were talking about him. Well, just a little. Not really talking about you, but hoping you'd be here. So, yeah, I guess that wouldn't be bad. But anyway, so I got some new glasses coming. I'm kind of looking forward to it. I think there's going to be a little bit of an increase. I can't remember. I needed to look at my thing again. I can't remember what she put in my bifocal. Because that's the problem. I used to work with a guy. He was from up around Kingsport. But in fact, he's one of the reasons I moved to Nashville. He went down there, and then he and another guy that had worked in Tri-Cities when I started out as an AMP, they're the ones that got me hired down in Nashville. So and he wore glasses, I guess, most of his life, but he got to a point when I was working with him in Nashville where he had to go to bifocals. He used to just gripe and complain all day long about those because you look up a lot when you're working on airplanes, and when you look up, it's really hard to get your head in the right place to see through your bifocals. And I told him, I said, you ought to get them on the top. And he was going to try to get that done at one point in time. I don't think it, but I've learned since then that there are people that do that have to work over their heads or have to do that kind of thing. They put the bifocal up here, or they can. And
yeah, they'll put them on the top and the bottom.
Something just got really quiet.
Trifocals.
Well, they can do that, yeah. Or they can just put them all over your lenses. You know, Phil's got some kind of crazy thing where he can look out different ways. And
that's the way mine are, and they drive me crazy.
He said it took him
a while to learn. Drive, buddy.
Do what?
I said they drive me crazy, and that's a short drive.
I was always afraid I'd never get used to it because I didn't need it that much anyway. But doctors used to say, "Oh, you ought to try these progressive lenses." And I think, why? I just need two things. I mean, why go to that much trouble? I didn't think I'd like them, and I'm pretty sure I probably wouldn't.
They make me a little ill, and I've had them for like a year and a half now, and they still make me a little ill.
Well, now let me get this right. You don't move your head so much as you rotate. You move is it that way, or you do move your head? No, you just move your eyes, right?
Kinda. Well, either or. And I usually just take the darn things off and then move my head.
That's not how you're supposed to do
it. Just like my father, put my optivisors on and just take the darn things off.
Yeah, optivisors will ruin you though, because you take them off and you can't see anything. And for those
you wander around the shop for 2 hours saying, "Where the hell are my optivisors?" when they're on your head.
For if you don't know, an optivisor it's a magnifying goggle or a lens thing that you tilt up and bring it down when you're machinists and people that work in that kind of stuff use them a lot. And jewelry makers, you see them on different people, but if they're not wearing some kind of fancy loop, but they're real handy. I've got a pair now. I've got an optivisor, but I think Brenda keeps it, so I've got this pair, and I can put different lenses in it, and I really like it. It's got a little light, and I can change the glass. I can change the lenses to be several powers, so when I'm doing certain kinds of like gun work or working on little things, or I can put these on and read the ruler a lot better. And either has a headband or you can wear it like glasses. But optivisors, your dad was the first one I ever knew really had an optivisor, I think. And I finally broke down and bought one, and they're pretty handy. Carol says she likes her transition glasses, but I feel a bit. Let me just turn that up where it's bigger. Oh, it won't. Well, I see. I learned 3 things today, and I forgot some others. I guess there's no room left in the filing cabinet, so now when I put something new in, I got to take something out. So these 3 things I've learned this morning since I got up are just
all gone.
Because I forgot how to do I feel a bit off whenever I switch between my glasses and my contacts. Oh, I think you're saying you'll feel a bit off, maybe, or odd. Yeah, I don't know how people do that. I mean, especially if you've got transitions, they don't make contacts that way, do they, Carol? Or do they? Maybe they do. Somebody told me one time that they thought they made bifocal contacts, but okay, I got you.
But then how would you get them lined up right?
I don't know how you line them up to begin with. I've never
had you'd have like one that was upside down, and man, that'd mess you up, I would think.
Carol, you're catching on quick. I should have known better than have a school teacher in here. She knows all the Little kids have taught her everything.
Old bear new tricks.
He may forget the other ones. Yeah, and I'm afraid that's right. Like I said, I learned 3 things this morning, and I couldn't remember how to highlight a comment and put it on the screen. Oh well. Well, okay. Oh, bifocal contacts. Oh, you mean one side or the other? Now I have heard people talk about that, and see, are yours like that, Carol? Because I thought that would absolutely drive me to distraction. I mean, it's like your eyes. I mean, I would be off balance, I think. I bet it does take a while to get used to. I mean, that's not right. I mean, something's going to be fuzzy all the time, one side or the other. I didn't used to be so much for being car sick. I've marked in the test. I've sat in the back of the truck many times and read books and in the van and whatever. But since I ruptured my eardrums a few years back, and it seems like ever since then I've had I'm more motion sensitive or something. So ever since then I've had trouble reading in a car. If I don't have my right glasses on, if I don't just focus on one, if I try to look up my bifocals, I'll get sick. But so I can't imagine trying to drive with contacts like that. Okay.
Making my eyes itch.
Making your eyes itch. Yeah. Tina said contact spin. That makes sense. Outer circle is for close up. Inner circle is for far out. Far out. Man. I was telling Mark earlier, I've got squirrels out here waiting. I think they've emptied my feeders again this morning or yesterday. After the rain, they got busy apparently. And now they're just kind of out there lined up with signs like, when's the restaurant opening? I got them where they'll now go to the corn cobs and stay off the feeders. But now what they do is, instead of emptying my feeders and then going to the corn cobs, now they just go empty the corn cobs and then come up to the feeders. I doubt if there's any way I could ever put enough corn cobs out there to keep them occupied.
Yeah, you need a whole grain bin.
Yeah. And then maybe I can have an old-fashioned squirrel killing, like a rat killing, and then run them out.
Big giant grain bin full of field corn.
That would do it. And like Jerry Clower used to talk about a rat killing. You remember that?
We had rat kilns in them days.
Yeah. They'd have to get them out of the corn crib because they'd be all in there. So that's where he talked about
McCain's barn was.
Huh?
That's the way Joe McCain's barn was. Joy and I'd go down there and trap rats and have a great time.
Oh, yeah. Then the squirrels would just live here. Well, I'm pretty sure they do now. I mean, I saw one at the mailbox the other day, but I'm not sure if he put anything in or not. Oh, now Carol's saying they may not make that kind anymore with the circle in the middle. What was I saying about rat? Oh, Jerry Clower said that they cheated. They took a Model T Ford and put an inner tube or a hose pipe on the muffler tailpipe of the car, stuck it up under that floor of that grain bin where the rats were, and he said there just wasn't nothing more fun than clubbing them carbon monoxide and sick rats over the head as they staggered out of that barn or that corn bin. He probably can't say that anymore. But Carol isn't the optic. Oh, this could lead into a huge discussion here about optics. Well, They do new things now.
That's a squirrel.
That's a squirrel. You know, she didn't dilate my eyes the other day. And I said, you don't have to do that anymore, right? Because they've got a camera thing now that evidently can look back in there and they don't have to. And she said, I'll dilate them for you if you want them dilated. And I said, well, not if you don't have to. But I said, I just wondered if that's what that was. And they get a printed output of your inner part of your eye, which is why they dilated them. At least that's what I always thought. I said, I never understood how it all works. Squirrel. Well, it's magic, Tina. I mean, that's just all there is to it. And it's a strange and wondrous thing. I've been to science classes and seen pictures and everything, and I still don't know how it works. But it does. You know, that's getting off subject. But you know, it's like Mike Wheeler. I mean, my Lord, Mike called me the other day because I'd put something in there about my Instagram was messed up on my phone, and I hadn't much more than put it out there. And Mike Wheeler calls me and wants to ask me if I've checked a couple things. And then he found out I had the wrong kind of phone, so he said, "Never mind." But I mean, he just amazes me how what the stuff he knows and figures out, and him blind. I mean, he can be listening to. He had four. I think he told me he had four live streams on at the same time, and he listens to them, you know, because he can't read them or see them, so he's listening. He's got some kind of voice to text kind of device on his computers or his phones, and he doesn't seem to miss anything. I mean, it's like he can hear all of them and pick them out. Oh, Mayor Contreras just got kicked out. Thank you, Carkey. I didn't even see that one pop up. Isn't it something, Tina? I mean, you know, and you hear about that with people that lose a sense hearing or going blind. And, you know, Mike's not been blind all of his life, so it's something he's learned as an adult that he has honed those extra senses. And I'm not sure how old he was. I think he was in his 20s, but he's amazing, the stuff he does. And Marky's got a cane now that will read to him or tells him things, and it's called a We Walk cane. It's got I think it has a GPS sensor in it, and he has a program where he can map. He needs to go down to the corner store and get 7-Eleven for a big gulp. He can put that in that cane, and it will help him guide him down there.
Really?
Yeah, ain't science amazing? I mean, it is amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Well, Carol, you're probably right. Carol thinks he likes to do that because he likes to be able to do things sighted people. I get that because, I mean, he's had to compensate for that, and it's amazing.
He's like that old codger on "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" on the train tracks.
Yeah, but he was always on the train tracks. He couldn't get off. I mean,
but he knew things.
Well, yeah, he knew things because he had seen things. If I'm not mistaken.
Cow on the top of a cotton house.
Yeah. Yeah, a cow on top of a cotton house and something else. Yes, that could be a whole topic for a whole show.
That's
we need to get. I need to find out how many.
Start on that squirrel.
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou fans are out there, and get them to come in so we can all talk about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, because that's just a great movie.
It's one of the finer pieces of cinema ever.
Yeah, absolutely right. Speaking of squirrels, I got one out here. It's about Teddy size, a gray squirrel, and he's.
Do you not get fox squirrels in the yard too?
No, not here. You know, here's a little fact.
That's another squirrel.
real squirrel, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. You know, I don't know if you remember this or not, but up around Johnson City in that area,
We didn't
Jonesboro,
have them at all.
we didn't have fox squirrels. No, and when I was a kid, I can remember going down to Clinch Mountain to hunt fox squirrels. Now, in thinking about that, I'm not sure we were in all the right places because I know more about them now, biology and all that. But hey, John, welcome back. Just got this thing in a can. We do too,
Did
John.
they pay,
We'll
did
have
they
to
pay
talk
you
about
money? I hope they paid you money.
Yeah. Anyway, we only had them in some places. Then when I moved to Middle Tennessee, and
You had them.
we had them down there more. And but now, as I worked 20 years around the lake, the Norris area, and up in there, they moved. And my buddy Steve Cockrell and I were kind of monitoring them. And the last one I saw, the furthest west I ever saw one was almost down to, well, just north of Knoxville. He was all the way down near Andersonville, Tennessee, which is at least 20 or 30 miles from where I'd ever seen one before that. And they were slowly getting further and further down. So someday the eastern and western populations might mix. I don't know, or middle Tennessee populations, but those things are so cool. Hey, Dave, welcome in. Good to see you this morning. Morgan just went out chasing squirrels. That's one of her dogs, one of her hounds. Oh, me. Okay, well, we were going to talk about, Mark and I were thinking, well, now, wait a minute, I'm going to say something first. I guess I think everybody here knows about Dean's dad. I just, keep him in mind. And it's Dean's, he's put a lot of stuff out, and you can tell he's struggling a bit just by what his posts, I think. And so I wasn't too surprised when he posted the thing about his phone number, or I guess that's his phone number. And it's funny because I sent him, he sent that out, or I saw that, and I sent him a note back and said, "Hey, Dean, how you doing today?" And he he sent me back a note and said, "Okay, who is this?" I said, "Oh, I forgot to say that part." So anyway, but I know he's had a pretty rough go of it. And then I guess if you pray or if you don't pray or what, to keep it in your thoughts, but the folks in Ukraine probably can use all the help they can get, because I think they're in trouble. Hey, Don, good morning, Hitchhiking Bones. So anyway, yeah, Dean's working hard to stay above water. You're right. He's not working right now. He told me that a couple of days ago. He said his boss at work has been real good about letting him take a few days off. So hopefully that'll help. And yes, you too, Tim. Which one, Tina? I've chased my tail a little bit, so now I don't know which you're agreeing with me on. But anyway, that said, I just wanted to talk about those, not talk about, but mention those things, because things are getting kind of it tears me apart when I see all the strife in the world, and what gets me is the kids. There's always these little kids that are stuck in the middle of all these adult problems, and they can't do anything about it. I mean, they don't have anything to do with it. It's not their fault. They didn't start it. They can't finish it, and they don't understand it, and they suffer the most, I think, children. And makes me think how lucky I am that I have a better way to grow up than that. But that's probably going to go on. The struggle over there will probably go on for a long time, even if they take over, because I don't see those people giving up that easy. And anyway, it's horrible. We are pretty lucky that we're not close to all them people, I think sometimes. That probably helps a lot. Anyway, Mark and I Mark came up with this idea actually. And so I'm going to put some slides
Don't
up.
blame it on me.
Well, okay. I can't blame it on you, but I can at least say maybe you did play a role. I can at least say that.
Oh, yeah.
So here I'm going to put the first slide up, and this is a story of adventure and danger and excitement and death-defying death-defying feats of balance and dare-do and fighting leeches and dodging snakes and grabbing giant fish with teeth in their mouth with your bare hands. So Mark and I came up with a name for it. We like to go bow hunt. We like to canoe and be outside and chase animals and or see animals. And one day we decided, maybe I decided, we were going to float down the Stones River, and I'll show you in a minute. And we passed through this deep hole. This happened to be and these giant fish were in there surfacing, rolling up to the top like great blue whales, catching a breath, and they were circling through. So we decided we needed to come back there again. So we went several times, and it was full of really big gar, which was kind of odd in a way because the water it just never did seem quite like the right place for big gar there in that part of the river. But they were there, and we called them big bluebacks because when they'd roll up, they looked like they were blue on the back. And I'll show you a picture in a minute, and you kind of get an idea what I mean. But anyway, we came up with a name for it, and we called it garping because it was kind of a combination of fishing for gar, bow fishing for gar, and carp. Is they're and that's most places they're both considered a rough fish. Some people used to call them trash fish. You're sure they were fish, Moby? Well, they could have been Nessie's. They could have been Nessie's cousins because I'm going to tell you something. They were pretty good size, and as we found out, they were pretty tough. And we ended up going back to that same hole several times over a couple of years, and we got a couple of small ones out of that hole, but the big ones seemed like they always broke off or broke our
I don't remember
arrows.
us ever getting one of those big ones.
Me either, but I know we hit a couple.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there are some in saltwater, John. And in fact, Mark and I were talking about what the main freshwater species are in the state, and I got some pictures here in a minute. But I knew that I read something about a state record or a record that was of a fish I didn't recognize, and I think maybe it was a saltwater gar of some sort. If you've caught some, did you catch those out in the ocean or in the estuary type terrain? The shallower water or brackish water or whatever. But anyway, the definition. So I wrote a definition of garping, or at least a simple one. And this is how I said, according to the Pruitt and Zorn's greatly abridged Appalachian Dictionary, it defines garping as the fine art of hunting or fishing for gar and carp with the bow and arrow and standing in a canoe. And that pretty well wraps it up, wouldn't you say?
That's it.
That's and a whole lot of fun. I mean, we had both bay and ocean. Well, that's interesting. They get pretty big, John? Because I mean, I've got pictures of some really big freshwater ones, and usually everything gets bigger once it gets to the ocean. But anyway, it's not all about gar, but that's a picture of a short or a spotted gar, and we have those. And probably most of the state, although I always thought there's more of them in middle and west Tennessee than there are up here, but we do definitely have them. in the lakes up here. You usually see them in the more shallow water. Seen spotted gar up to 3 feet long. Yeah, I'm sure he has. Oh, we got alligator. Oh, yes, I know about alligator gars. I've got some pictures of them too, John. We've certainly got alligator. We've got freshwater alligator gars. I don't know if they're the same species or not, but we don't have them right here where I'm at now. But West Tennessee has them, and a lot of the southern states have. Texas is really big on alligator gar.
And they actually go out into saltwater, or at least brackish water in Texas.
Oh, do they?
You can catch a big gator gar in some of those bays along the coast.
Oh, wow.
And they're definitely in the same kind of stuff you'd find a redfish in, or a speckled sea trout or whatever. So
yeah, they are big in Texas, John. They have tournaments for them out there, just like bass tournaments back east. And and a lot of them now. I saw a listing, a sign, and some information about an alligator gar or a gar roundup kind of a thing out there, or a tournament. And all the fish they caught in that case was going into fertilizer was what they were doing. Okay, Carol, be safe out there. I'm going to miss your input now. When I can say things and get away with it, you're not going to be here to correct me or laugh at me. So hurry back. And anyway, so I put together a few slides, and we were just going to talk. And I'm going to start out and talk just for a moment. I've decided I'm going to talk about this man in another show, but this is Fred Bear, and Mark and I used to refer to him as Fred himself, because Fred Bear had a lot to do with establishing bow hunting and archery in general, I think, in this country in the 30s, 40s, 50s. He had a hero that Mark and I've also probably consider the same. And was it Pope or Young? I can't remember now which one he was. I guess Pope.
Art Young.
Art Young. Okay.
He was the bow hunter.
Pope and Young. People that keep records of things like largest deer and that sort of thing that somebody shoots with a bow and arrow, they're called the Pope and Young Awards, or Pope and Young system. I can't think of the name of it now, but they have a system of measuring and counting points and all that kind of stuff. And they got started. They kind of brought archery back sort of into I started to say modern age, but that's not really true. Maybe it'd be better to say they kind of introduced it to the European masses on this continent at some point. But they really liked archery, or they talked about it and wrote about it and shot about it. And did they write in Witchery of Archery, or did they had something to do with getting it written or printed or something?
That was Maurice Thompson.
Yes.
And he was dead before they.
Okay, well, maybe that's the connection then.
He was like, he and his brother were they were both Civil War veterans.
Right.
And
since they took all their guns, they were Confederate Civil War veterans.
Correct. They were from swamp country.
Yeah, I think they were from Georgia or Carolina.
Georgia or South Carolina, one, I think. And they hunted all over northern Florida.
Fascinating stories about
they were Confederate soldiers that had their arms removed. Not their arms,
not these arms.
Not these arms. They had their weapons removed, and so they built bows. And they'd been doing that since they were little kids, I guess.
Well, they were just like so many other people in that time too, as I recall. It's been a long time since I read it, but they also depended on that as a way to earn both money and food. And one of the things they did in Florida was back in the days when the feather trade was so big, They shot a lot of shorebird or wading
They
birds.
were big egret hunters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fascinating part I thought about them in Florida was talking about how rural and remote and how wild Florida was, even up to, well, I guess around the turn of the century. And I honestly went to Florida in the early 70s, and it was still pretty wild. I mean, it was much more rural than it is today.
Right.
There were people down there still using outhouses when I went to school down there. I mean, it was out in the country, and Florida was still out in the country. A little different than here, but not much. And but anyway, Fred Bear was he started he worked in the one of the car factories in Detroit, and over time he ended up leaving, but he started making bows and arrows in his garage. He and a friend of his, and over time he lobbied and worked with the state governments to make bow hunting legal, in Michigan particularly, because that's where he was at. And he has some patents for building bows back before anybody else really started doing that much and selling them, in the mainstream marketplace. And so some of the very first bows I remember seeing that were made and sold were bear bows. So I was always a big fan, even though I didn't know that much about it, but when I first got started. But we get spotted sea trout in Jersey, but we call them wheat. Yeah, and down here they call them. Well, we call them spotted sea trout. Some people do, and they're also drum. And I was thinking there was another name people called them down here, and I can't remember what that one was. Anyway, Fred Bear is kind of a hero. He's been gone for a few years. I pulled up some statistics on him when he moved to Florida. He took his business in the 70s, I believe. Might have been 80s. He moved it down to Florida, and he built a big museum down there near Gainesville. It was on my way to Disney World a few times. And Tina says good marketing. You throw your bow and you get frustrated, then you have to buy a new one. Kinda. I don't think bow hunters throw theirs as often as golfers throw their clubs, but there's probably some truth in that. But anyway, he had a lot to do with that, and so I've always been a bit of a fan. And these maps are showing some of the areas we're talking about today. This is in the little town of, well, not little anymore, town of Smyrna, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville, and near where they built the Nissan truck plant 25, 30, well, no, more than that now, 40 years ago maybe now. And but we used to fish this. We used to go out and canoe in this creek when Mark would come to visit, and it's called Stewart. We called it Stewart Creek, and a lot of the signs say Stewart Creek, but I saw an old map today that said Stewart with an R, a D instead of a T. So I'm not sure which one's actually correct. Stewart probably. And there was an Air Force base there called. Maybe that's where the name change came from. It was Stewart Air Force Base, so maybe that's when it got the new name. But anyway, till the 70s or 80s, there was an Air Force base there, and the creek ran out from where I lived and behind my house, and down kind of through the town and the edge of town and down to the Percy Priest Reservoir Lake, and it went kind of through the air base or the airport there in Smyrna. And Mark and I had some gay old times on that creek because it was a big, slow moving, flat country creek in a way, but it was full of these giant log jams. And then there was pipes, water pipes or sewer pipes that would cross it every once in a while, and you have to either duck under in your canoe or climb over and get back in your canoe. And the log jams were kind of that way. We'd have to work our canoe through. No, this one was in, I may have the name wrong, John. I was thinking it was Stewart, but maybe not. This one was in Smyrna, Tennessee. It's been closed for a while, although I'm sure it was probably still open when you were in, because it's not been closed that long. I think it was closed. In fact, no, it was. I moved down there in '80 and it was closed. So I guess it closed in the '70s. National Guard still operated out there, and there was a couple of companies that worked on airline-sized planes that haul freighters and that were freighters and stuff. I thought it was Stewart, but I might be wrong. I'll have to look that up, or you can if you want to. But it was in Tennessee, just south of Nashville. And this other map on the right is, and you can't see it very well because I had to back out so far, but it's showing an area of the West Fork of the Stones River. And there's a green spot down there by that lower arrow, and that is Stones River National Battlefield, which is a Civil War battlefield. Actually a pretty major battle that was fought on the last day of 1862 and the first day of 1863. And well, there might be, John. That's okay. Now I'm going to look it up. I can't stand it. I gotta bear with me. Yeah, they're calling it Stewart. Sewart. Sewart. John, that was it. I think it will let me do this. I'll post a link and you can see where we're talking about. I think you can see the creek running back along the back side of it there. Maybe. So I was putting a T in it that didn't belong. It's just Sewart. So that might have been what the creek was being called by locals, but I think it was probably Stewart from years ago. I'll have to show you that map, Mark. It was an older map of Middle Tennessee. Didn't show hardly any roads or anything. It showed railroads and the creeks and the rivers and wide spots in the pike, as they used to call it, the Nashville pike. But anyway, Mark and I set out one day. I decided that it'd be a good idea if we
went on an adventure.
Went on an adventure, exactly. So we packed our lunch in a canoe and our bows and arrows and our whatever else we had along with
Fly rods.
Fly rods, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't go anywhere without our fly rods back then. And I thought it'd be a really cool idea if we put in our canoe near the battlefield, because there was a good place there to, put in, pull over, get in. And then we would just paddle down the river, just easy as you please, and go down to the lake where the river went into the lake, right down by where Stewart Creek ran into the lake. And I just thought that'd be a piece of cake, and we could do that, in a few hours. And, Brenda could drop us off, and then she could come pick us up in a couple of, 3 or 4 or 5 hours, something. And we weren't in a hurry. We were just going to Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, and just ease down the river and see what we could see. And we did see things. I mean, I believe I think we saw some mink that day.
Big old mink running up and down the bank.
Which I might think that's weird in Middle Tennessee to see mink, but I actually saw quite a few down there over the years. Were you with me the day I saw the female, the cow? I don't know what they call them. Female mink, and she had 2 little ones running with her.
No.
Right along the edge of the creek there. It was right behind my house.
Yeah.
They were ducking and looking in every hole along the bank, Oh, fighter jets. Okay. I think somebody told me once there were fighter jets down there. when I was down there, there were only helicopters. There was a Army Guard unit with helicopters down there, and there was a guard, an Air Force Guard unit at Nashville BNA that had back then they had C-130s. They were one of the most active C-130 squadrons, I think, in the National Guard. They went overseas a lot. So anyway, Mark and I started out. It was a beautiful sunny day. I mean, it couldn't have been better. Well, maybe it could have been. Like there'd been about a foot more water in the river. Because we learned real quick that we did not know that river like we probably should have. I mean, it seemed like such a gentle, flowing little river, you know. But what we found out was that time of year it didn't always have a lot of water in it. And
it did where we launched.
Where we launched it was real good, and where we got out was real good. But in between there was about a 3-week slog through rocks and
sand
and stingweed and leeches, and I'm sure poisonous snakes of all kinds, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! It took us what was supposed to be a 4 or 5 hour trip down the river took us till dark. We were there from early in the morning till just about dark that night. In fact, I wasn't sure Brenda was ever going to find us. And this was back before we had cell phones. So first thing we had to do was find a place to get out of the river and hike up to the road and see if we could find somebody to let us use a telephone. And Brenda had no idea where we were. And I'm trying to tell her how I think she would get to it. And eventually she did. But it was quite the journey. And it turns out that we never did get where we thought we were going to go because it was still a few miles down the river. Yeah. When we got there, it would have been, next morning or something. It was quite the adventure. We might as well have been Lewis and Clark.
Dragging a canoe.
Dragging a canoe. Because we dragged that canoe far more than we rode in it that day.
Well, there was a famous Cherokee.
Yeah, man, there was.
His name was Dragging Canoe.
Yes, he was.
And I think he probably spent time on that river.
He may have. That may very well be where he got his name. And we learned something about Stones River that day, and that's it. We should make sure it had plenty of water in it before you floated it. And like I said, we did very little floating.
We did a lot of walking.
Did a lot of walking that day, and we probably shot a few fish or saw a few fish, and that's where we saw the big bluebacks. But early on, because once we got down in the shallow water, they weren't down there. There was a few spots where we could get in the canoe and fly fish over towards some pools. I'm not sure if the canoe was floating or if it was just sitting on a sandbar while we were doing that. But, we were able to fish a little bit out of the canoe, but that was quite the adventure. But that's kind of what led to all the garping adventures we had after that, or at least a lot of them. Some of them. Because
that's the day we discovered those big gar and that.
Yeah, that's the day we knew we had to come back with the proper equipment. Which, as it turns out, took us a little while to figure out what that was because we were making our own. And this boat, believe it or not, Mark, that canoe is the canoe, not the canoe, but that is the same model and everything that I had. I believe it had the same orange plastic seats.
Did it have those plastic seats? I don't know.
Yeah, mine did. Your dad's had like webbing material or something.
Yeah, they were almost like a lawn chair.
Yeah. But this one, I remember those orange seats. I don't know why, but that stuck out as soon as I saw it. I don't have the canoe anymore, but I knew that was it. And, that canoe's not terribly heavy. You could throw it up over your head and carry it. But after you've done that for about 400 miles in a day, it's pretty heavy. A lot heavier than it started out, I'll tell you that. Fortunately, we didn't have to carry it over our head very often that day, but we did drag it and pick it up a lot.
Yep.
And I do mean a lot. I put down in my notes somewhere that you should, before you go on a river adventure like that, you probably should know more about the waterway you're on. Yeah, Tina, I'm sure there were probably cell phones back then, but I didn't know anybody that had one. If they had one, it was
I
something.
don't think they were invented yet.
Well, they had car phones, but that was really a different thing. Because this would have been
early 80s.
Yeah, early mid 80s up until I don't know, early 90s maybe, when might have been that we were out in you were out in Land Between the Lakes by then, or sometime in there. I can't remember the years now, but that was quite the trip. But that's kind of a boat is what we would stand up. The top left picture there is the bow or the front of that boat, and we would actually, one of us would stand up in that. And actually, it was, I mean, I had people look at me like I had three heads when I've said that in the past, but it really wasn't that hard to do. But we'd both been in canoes, not whitewater or anything, but we'd both been in canoes for a long time, off and on. His dad had one. I'd been in one before. It wasn't my first canoe trip, or it was my first canoe I ever owned, but we could stand up in that and you could look down in the water and you could get some pretty good shots. And, for bow hunting, that flat bottom boat there was pretty good too, because you could push it up in the shallows. Somebody could push it with a pole, or you can put a little motor on the back and, huff along the lake and, get to some shallow places where there's gar and carp and that sort of thing. Let's see what my next slide is. Oh, and then here's some much higher grade boats that they now use. Like you go to Texas, this is what you see down there. Guys in these big old airboats, like in the upper right-hand corner and the upper left-hand corner, and they've got names of sponsors on the side, and they've got lights all the way around the front, so they bow fish at night down there. I had a picture of that too. I'll see if I can't pull that up before I leave. But you light that water up, and you can see these big old honking alligator gar swimming through the water. And of course, then the other way we did it, we bow fished, was by wading, and that's that guy in the middle there. He's wade fishing. Now that's not a gar. That's what's called a bowfin. And one thing they both kind of have in common though is they're both pretty primitive fish. Gar species are, I don't know if they're probably one of the older species of fish that's left. In a sense, they don't even have gills, but they also have like a swim bladder. They have to come up and gulp air every once in a while. That's why they would come up. In fact, that's how you try to shoot one, is they come up near the top of the water and roll over like a whale. And they'll when it's hot, you'll see them. They'll open their mouths and they'll actually kind of gulp air and go back down. They're they're kind of interesting, but they're just different. But that's how they do it in Texas and Louisiana and places like that. They get flat bottom airboats, and those things can literally go anywhere. I used to have some friends in Florida that built airboats, and they took me places I didn't think a boat could go. It's pretty wild. Okay, first cell phone was sold for public use was in 1984. Squirrel. Really? I didn't know they went that far back. I knew there was car phones way back because I remember seeing them in the movies. 1984 sounds about right. I bought my first bag phone in the mid-90s. Yeah, I know. I remember bag phones. I still used a bag phone when I first went to work for TVA in 1997. So, and not many people had cell phones that I knew then. Some people did. I swore I'd never have one back then. Now I don't know what I'd do without it. I mean, how am I going to Google stuff? And Hey, Amy, good to see you. Good morning, ma'am. Jump right on in here. And if you got a squirrel you need chased, just throw it out in there and we'll take off after it. The fish, I already told you what that fish was. And then these other two guys in the lower left and lower right, they're doing kind of what Mark and I would do. They're standing up in the bottoms of their boats. The one on the left is a kind of a top setting kayak, sort of a fishing boat, which is not all that steady, to be perfectly honest, although that wouldn't be as bad. Now, the one on the far right looks to me like it's about to go under, and that's sort of what I'd call an open water kayak, and they set pretty low in the water to begin with. That one might be a little iffy. You know what? I just looked, Mark. I think he's got outriggers on that thing.
He does, which is the only reason he's not in the drink.
Yeah, I just now noticed that. That's what's keeping him from turning over. That would be tippy, bad tippy.
Yeah.
No, hey Kay, good morning to you too. You're not late. You're just not here when we got here. That doesn't make you late. You had to have the antenna on top of your car, but yours worked well. We had one. I don't know if I had one with an antenna on the car. We had one that carried around in the truck, and I could rarely get anybody on the other end of it. And of course the battery wouldn't stay charged and all that. I'll give Marcus a moment to come back. So how's Amy and Kay today? We're talking a little bit about bow fishing and adventures Mark and I have taken on the river and lakes of Tennessee. And he has in Arkansas. I don't think I ever got on the water in Arkansas. Pretty Woman is the only movie I can think of with bag phones. They all had them on Rodeo Drive. That's interesting, Tina, because I hadn't even thought about that. I'm sure you're right. I've seen it several times. I'm sure you guys have too. The guy that gets credit for inventing the cell phone, he had one of those great big things you'd hold up to the side of your head. It looked like a brick with an antenna sticking out of it, and it was kind of angled on both ends, but it was huge by today's standards. Anyway, of course, phones, I remember when phones were getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then they started getting bigger, bigger, bigger again. So we got at least up where we are today. And here's the kind of equipment that we used, or some of it we used. Mark and I had a habit of trying to make our own equipment a lot. So, you see in the front there, lower right-hand corner, you see something called, on the front it says Cajun Archery.
How do you spell that?
Which?
You said it was something called.
Oh. If you don't know, you don't need to know. Tina says they used to call them brick phones. Well, that makes sense. They were like a brick. Anyway, these are recurve. This is what we shot a lot bow fishing. These are recurve bows. What for a while, a lot of people would have called, old timey bows, I guess, because the young lady in the top has got a compound bow that she's fishing with or shooting with, and that's I guess that I would still say that's all the rage. There's probably way more of them out there than there are recurves, but probably about the time Mark and I were doing all this stuff, we were shooting recurves, and I didn't have a longbow yet, and because I bought one compound bow and I hunted with it 1 or 2 seasons, and I just didn't like it. One thing, it weighed a ton. It was just heavy, and I really liked recurves better. They were just so much lighter and easier to get around in the woods with, and I mean that was just, and that's all I ever hunted with. What?
And they have a soul.
And they have a soul. Yeah, I'm not sure compounds don't have a soul.
Compounds don't have a soul.
And they have no conscience either. They anything in the fire anyway, that's a whole nother topic. I won't do that. Anyway, she has a fiberglass arrow in her hand. That's what Mark and I used to call a Fred Bear lure. And fish, if they're not biting anything else, they'll just about always bite a Fred Bear lure. And if you're a good shot. Anyway, she's hunting with a compound bow, which is more modern. And a lot of people, I guarantee if you dropped it in the water, I bet it'd sink straight to the mud too. And I also took that picture not because she's a pretty girl, but to say, it ain't just bearded old guys like us that bow fish. There's a lot of people out there that do it. There's some really good videos out now on, and I'll show you some fish here in a minute. There's a couple of a man and his daughter have videos. I don't remember their name, but they live in Florida and I think they live up against a canal down there. And he and her both are always out there shooting fish. And I'm pretty sure they're shooting compounds. But she's out there shooting them, and she's a pretty good shot too. She can shoot them halfway across the canal or more. I mean, long shots for some invasive species of fish that are in Florida now. And that's another key to it. When I say bow fishing, but in Tennessee and in most states, not all, but most states, the only thing you can bow fish for are usually what we call rough fish, gar, carp. Yes. Were you wanting attention? I thought you had your hand up.
I was just telling John, see you in a bit.
Oh, see, John's there? Or was there?
Well,
John here.
John
okay,
here.
John. I'm sorry.
Not John here. John there.
John there. All right, tell Dad we said hi, John. Anyway, boy, that squirrel got me. I don't know where I was at. Oh, well, moving on. Oh,
it had to do with hunting?
Well, yeah, I did actually bow hunting.
Oh, shooting fish in Florida.
Fish, yeah, it was in Florida. We'll talk about that a little bit more.
Invasive
species, which carp actually are too. But there were buffalo here, and I don't know if there was this carp species that was native or not. But most of the carp here are Asian carp of some sort, and including some really bad ones that are here now. But anyway, and that top upper right hand one is a kind of a reel for bow fishing, but it's like one a lot of us might have grown up on using when we were. I thought it was really cool if I got to go from the cane pole to a fishing rod that had that kind of reel on it. I thought I'd made it.
The old Zebco.
I was all grown up by then.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a group of arrowheads that are designed specifically for fishing. And in a way, they're much like harpoons that were used many years ago. They've got barbs. And this thing will go through the fish, and then this opens the barbs, and most of those, all of those, all except the bottom left one, are supposed to open once it goes through the fish, and then it'll catch, and you can retrieve the fish that way. Because if you don't, it'll just slide back out, and they'll swim off. And half these fish could probably live forever with a hole in them. Gar and stuff are very difficult. I mean, they're just tough. But anyway, these are different kinds. And the one down in the lower left-hand corner is kind of an older style barb. And that's just basically a nail or a piece of wire that's pushed through a hole in that arrow and then bent over both sides. And that's the kind of marking I used to make at home. We would make stuff like that to try to go after those big bluebacks down there in the river. And we tried all kinds of stuff. We did that. We ground our own points. We used old broadheads that we ground up. But I think the biggest mistake we were making back then was we were trying to shoot with aluminum arrows, and they would break.
Mm-hmm.
We stuck a couple of those big guys, and the arrow just popped loose right where it went into the tip. So the tip sunk in, I think, and then the arrow just snapped off. And man, that's the thing about gar, and I'll show you some examples in a minute. But gar are built like a nuclear submarine or something. The scales on those things are very thick, very tight, and very hard, and almost impenetrable. I mean, if you don't have if you don't have a really sharp point on your fishing arrow, it'll just bounce off. And they're in some ways amazing. I've read stories that made fish like that maybe where people got the idea of chainmail, and because of the way their scales laid together. Now they're not like chain, but it's just the pattern and how they're. She used to have a crystal pistol crossbow for target shooting or target only. I've seen those. I always thought those were kind of cool, Kay, but I never had one. But I'm not Mark and I neither one are real. They've got compound bows now, big compound bows, not pistols like you had, that are just very controversial. Let's just say that, and I'll move on for now. I won't go there. But I think they're great to shoot and do that kind of stuff with. And this is an example of the gar species we have here in Tennessee and most of this country. The upper left is a long-nosed gar, and you can kind of see where it gets its name. And if you look closely there, you'll see that it has a mouthful of little teeth, which is another story. Mark and I had got one of these things on the line or tangled up in a line one day and got it up near the boat. And I told him to reach down and just grab him by the snoot. And he looked back at me and said, "There's a hand. That thing's full of tushes." And it is full, and they stick out on both sides. If you grab them by the nose, if you don't have on a pair of good leather gloves, they will absolutely perforate your hand because those teeth stick out kind of like an alligator on both sides, and especially those long nose. And then the lower right-hand corner is what we were talking about a while ago. Those are alligator gar, and they get huge by freshwater fish standards. I mean, in fact, I think I read they may be the largest scaled freshwater fish in America, at least, because sturgeons are bigger, but they're not really scaled like these guys are. They're more like a catfish. Okay, anyway, upper right-hand corner is the short-nosed spotted gar. No, that's a short-nosed gar. And the one down in the lower left is a spotted gar. And I know they look kind of alike, but if you saw them together, you'd see there was a difference. How the spots are arranged, the numbers of spots and that sort of thing. And the snoot's a little different. But these big alligator gars are what a lot of that Texas bow fishing action is all about. At least it has been. And they may be fishing for other things now, but Mark has an interesting story about alligator gar.
Well, and in Texas, they really kind of clamped down. They've decided that, they were being overfished, and they live to be really old. And so they've really kind of clamped down on
tournament and stuff.
Fishing for alligator gar. So those giants that they catch on the Trinity River and places like that, they're really trying to do some extra conservation for those fish. But I went to school in Arkansas, and we had a place that we bow fished pretty regularly for those bowfin and for carp. And the first time I ever went out there, I was weighted. It was just kind of a series of little lakes, and I was weighted up to about my waist and had my bow, and I was standing next to this submerged log and just waiting on a fish to come by, and then all of a sudden the submerged log came to the surface and did the gulping air thing that Tim was describing. And it was an alligator gar that was probably 8.5 feet long, big around as my waist. And I impersonated the Lord or a bullfrog and jumped up on the surface of the water and ran back to the bank because I'd never seen a fish that big.
I had that experience once in the ocean.
It spooked me. I was like, what in the world is, I'd never seen an alligator gar before that day. And
I've read, I don't know, and you may know different because you've been in places where there was more of them and they fish for them and stuff more, but I've read that there's never been a proven attack by alligator gar on a human.
yeah, I've never heard of one, but I mean,
But still,
if they wanted to grab you, they have big teeth.
oh, they got a mouth full of big teeth, and they could
To happen
swallow
at
half your
that,
arm. And
you're already worried about cottonmouths and things like that, and you're already a little bit creeped out because you're in a swamp in Arkansas, and
and there's people wandering around talking about knockler.
and there and a fish way
I lost you.
was a log.
I think you cut out there for a minute. What did you say?
I said it, when you're worried about all that stuff anyway, and all of a sudden something you thought was a log comes to the surface and it's right beside you.
Yeah, it'd be a little startling.
I definitely did not want to be the first documented case.
Not to get to very
But you
off.
can get clear up on top of the water and walk.
If you need to.
It's possible.
I was in Florida and I was probably a junior. I might have been a senior in high school, actually, either junior or senior. I don't remember. And I was down there with friends that we went down there a couple years in a row or three to help a friend of ours move back. He went to Florida every winter to teach, and then he would move back to Tennessee for the summer and do work and maybe research. He did research for a master's degree on freshwater mussels and things, marking the Clinch River and the Powell River and that sort of thing. And there was some stories about that for another day. But he was, we would go down there and help him pack up. Back then, Florida still was kind of a was a summer vacation place, and winter was not necessarily, there wasn't much going on. It wasn't the winter haven that it is now. And so he could rent this place on the beach, a house on the beach, real cheap all winter. But once summertime hit, then he had the rent went up exponentially, and he had to move out, and then he'd come back. He had some kind of a deal with the owner, I guess. Anyway, so of course, he was a teacher down there, a school teacher. So he had a lot of buddies that were school teachers. And one of them was an ex-Marine fighter pilot who was also a marine biologist. And he taught marine biology and that sort of thing in the school too. That's how they met. They were both teachers. And he had a 100-foot seine net, nylon net that you could pull out and drag in and see what you could catch out of the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Or other ways, I guess you could use it. But we tied poles on the ends, or it had poles on the end. And we were always trying to find a school of mullet or something to get into and have a big fish fry. But we'd sort of, pull a dog shoulder and plant one end of that thing in the beach down by the water's edge. And then a couple of us would take the other end out and stretch it out as far as we could get it. I think it was 100 feet long, and we'd stretch it out as far as we could go, usually till we were treading water. And then, we'd start swinging it around in a big arc until we got back, to the shore, and then we'd drag it up the beach and see what we caught. And what we ended up catching most of the time were stingrays of various kinds, I'm sure, and little sharks. We caught several little sharks. Boy, they're bodies too. And we caught a few good fish to eat and that sort of stuff. But we were out there one night, and it was dusky dark, and they decided, a whole bunch of the teachers got together and decided they were going to have a fish fry. So we got Ken's net, and we all went down to the beach. And I think this was a magical thing that happened. 2 trash cans appeared, one empty, one full of ice and beer. And so there was some of that being drank, and the fish were going in the other trash can. And I think we were trying to see which one we could empty or fill first, And just before anybody says anything, back then you could drink when you were 18, and I'm sure that we were 18.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. But anyway, it was getting dark, and we pulled that net around, and this time I didn't take it out. I had been doing it, and I was tired, so I stayed on the shore and was going to help pull it in. But so a couple people had it, and they were swinging around, and just as they were getting up close to the beach, it got real heavy, and so we weren't sure what we'd really gotten into. So they hollered at me, and I took off. I was much more athletic back then. I took off towards that pole to help them pull it in the rest of the way, see what we had. Well, what we'd gotten into was like a school of stingray, and they were just everywhere. When I got out by the net, suddenly these things were just all around me, bumping into me. They were jumping over the net. And it, for a moment, it scared the holy crap out of me. And I did one of them walking on water things, and somehow I got over that net and got on the other side of it. Not really sure how that happened. And because I was going to get out of those stingrays before one of them nailed me or something got me. Because, it's dark and you're in the ocean and there's things running into your legs. And you're not sure if the next one's going to be soft and squishy.
Which could be like an 8-foot bull shark or something.
Yeah, because I saw a kid catch one just like the day before up the beach, so it's not like they weren't down there. That island back then was Amelia Island, which is now this huge tennis resort area stuff. But at the lower end of it, we were about halfway down, I guess. Lower end of it's where the Nassau River dumps into the Atlantic, and or the St. John's, I guess. One of those they call. I think it might have been Nassau, or maybe they called it Nassau Sound or something. Anyway, it was one of the hottest shark fishing areas in the whole, eastern seaboard back then. So there were sharks there, and it was one. I didn't want to be the next one to find out what was down there. So I got up and out. Somehow I got up and out of that water and got over that net and got to the other side. And turns out it was just like a whole school or a flock. I don't know. They fly through the water. Maybe that's a flock. But we had a lot of them in the net that night. We never did get into a big school of mullet or something that'd been really good to smoke or, eat. But, we ate a lot of those stingrays. We chunked up and ate those. They kind of like scallops.
Right.
In fact, back then they used to tell me that that's what a lot of places served as scallop because it was easier to, catch. And anyway, the flesh looked a lot like that. So anyway, these are all gars, typical here. And these are the kind of fish that you bow fish for. Most states, I don't know about all states, but most states, native fish species are what they would call game fish, like bass and trout and that sort of thing, are off limits for bow fishing. But there are some exceptions to that, apparently. Next slide. And here's some more gar, just with people holding them. You can see, kind of get an idea of the size of some of them. And you can look at that upper left-hand corner there, and you can see what we were talking about, tushes. That thing has got a mouthful of teeth.
A mouthful.
And they are needle sharp, too. They're just, oh, man. You can see those things. Cat Mark has seen this, and we've actually done this, too, in a different way. But, they'll come up and grab a small fish and just skewer it, basically with those teeth until they can get it up where they can maneuver it and turn it around and swallow it. But man, once they get a hold of something, they're not going to let go. We fished for them actually with a fly rod a couple of times. And if you can get one, that's one of the things that they do. You can fish for them literally without a hook. And I think we tried this. We take a piece of nylon rope or something and unravel it and just have like a streamer, and you can throw that thing out there and play it in front of a gar, and they'll actually hit it just like a trout or something might. And when they grab it, it gets locked in their teeth, and then they've got a habit of spinning, kind of like an alligator or something. They'll turn on it, which wraps their mouth up in it even tighter. And once you get one on the line, you pretty much got to get it in because it's stuck. You're going to have to untie it to get it off most of the time. But we also seem like we caught some where they were hitting little poppers we had too.
Yeah, I don't remember what river that was.
That was in the Little Pigeon, and it was up by Sevierville. You and
exactly
that other guy, I can't think of his name right here.
When we came to visit you
Yes.
after that quail conference, it was.
Yeah.
We caught one that day on a fly rod, which was I thought pretty cool.
Yeah,
because we've never done that before.
I didn't even know they would hit a lure. I thought they were uninterested in artificial lures, but
yeah, and that was just like the Betts popper. That was a normal what we use for smallmouth.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, that's some examples of
That's a big old gator gar there.
Yeah, and I've got some pictures I'll pull up here in a minute and show that are much bigger than these. And here's the other common fish. These are carp, and I was telling Mark that the one in the lower right-hand corner was caught. I believe that's in Virginia, and that was a state record. And this had something to do with a study they were doing up there about carp in the native waters. And there's different kinds of carp. Most of them are considered rough fish or trash fish in some people's estimations, and they do displace native species to a degree. They're not as bad as some, but they were doing some. And then there's grass carp, which at least they used to think grass carp didn't reproduce, and I don't know if they do or not. I honestly don't know, but they get pretty big, and now they're pretty good at eating up algae and vegetation that you don't want in a pond or a lake. A lot of people use those in ponds, and the carp aren't really. They probably eat some bugs they suck up off the bottom, but mostly what they eat is plants and algae and that sort of stuff. And some people really like to eat them. I mean, I've had it smoked and it was pretty good, but old folks that I grew up with they didn't think you could eat them. They probably never tried one. They just always heard that. Now the other thing is that top right hand picture. Some of you may have heard of these, but these are one of the newest. What's the word? Curse or whatever on U.S. freshwater streams and rivers. These are silver carp, and they're out of Asia too. Almost most of the carp species here are Asian. I think there might be one or two European carps that are here, but most of them are Asian carps of some sort, big heads. I don't know, just all kinds of them. But these are what's called silver carp, and this has been a problem. They started spreading. I don't know if this is true, but I think I heard that they got out of some ponds and things. And of course, once they do that, due to floods and it could be Katrina may have hit Alabama or Louisiana, and they may have gotten out of freshwater ponds that they were raising them in or something. And then once that happens, they just spread everywhere. But the bad thing about these guys is what you see in that picture is a very common behavior. You can be cruising up the river and you get into a school of these things, and there's something about the boat and the water and the noise of the motor, vibrations, something gets them irritated and they start jumping like this, and they literally will jump into your boat, and they can literally knock you out of the boat. Some of them get pretty big, and so they actually pose a real threat to boaters. And I can't imagine skiing through a batch of those things, and I mean they could hurt you. And so this is a big push for natural resource agencies and groups all over the South. And Illinois and I think Illinois has them real bad up there.
Real bad.
And they're all the way up through the Mississippi region and into the Ohio and like the Wabash River and the Illinois River. And I mean, they're real bad up that way. Now, last I talked to somebody down here, or I read an article recently about people were asking TVA and TWRA, which is our state wildlife agency, what they were going to try to do about them, because people are actually worried about them, and probably should be. And of course, nobody thinks they're doing enough, but it's a hard problem to fix. And they're trying to figure out some kind of market for them so they can, go in and net them. But I doubt they'll ever be able to clear them out of the waterways. The best we can hope for is that they'll thin them out some. But they are becoming a real problem. It's exotic species like this, and maybe you've heard of things like zebra mussels, and they're not native here. They have no natural enemies here. They get introduced to the waterway, and then they just spread like wildfire everywhere. Zebra mussels are up and down the eastern United States. I don't know how far out west they've gotten, but they clog water intakes, they clog dam intakes, and they came over from Asia also, but they think they came over in the bilge tanks of ships. The larvae can get up inside, they're tiny and they can get hooked on the things and get up in these boats, which came into the St. Lawrence Seaway and then got into the Great Lakes and then spread south from there. Yeah, Tina, you're probably right about the pet store, because most of them are just another form of a goldfish, to be honest. And that's another way they got here. Carp, they used to bring them in and call them, what did we call them growing up? They called them Baltimore minnows and stuff like that when I was growing up, and all they were little fingerling carp, basically. And they would fish with them. And then, of course, if you dumped your bucket out at the end of the day because you still had some you didn't want to keep them, now you got some carp growing. Not always, Tina, but by and large, yeah. I mean, that's the problem when you start introducing species. You bring in something that destroys the ecosystem, and then you try to bring in something else to fix that, and most of the time it goes wrong. There are a few exceptions, but they're pretty rare. They have had some fairly good success, for example, on insects with the balsam woolly adelgid in the north in the high mountains here, where they brought in this little bitty fly or bee that's so specific it won't eat anything but that aphid. And so if you get something like that, they'll focus on the target species and then they'll die out themselves. But that's not usually how it works. They usually just keep going. And the zebra mussel was probably an accidental introduction. And I don't know about the carp. Like I said, I think I've heard that they think they may have escaped freshwater ponds where they were raising them for either food or for fertilizer or for cat food or something. And then, like I said, once they flood out and get out in the rivers, then they're gone, and you'll never catch them all. You'll never eliminate them all. And they can't do like I did one time, where I tried to kill off some unwanted species in my saltwater tank here at home, and I killed all my good stuff too, trying to just kill those bad ones. So everything you read on the internet's not true. Just believe that. That's true, Tina. They are native, but there also are some imported ladybugs.
And which are really nasty ones, like the ones that my folks have now.
Yeah, well, we have them down here, and they get up in your attic and stuff in the winter.
And they stink terrible.
Yeah, they're not the good old ladybugs like we grew up with, Tina. They're different. They're not as colorful. They're not bright red and little polka dots. They're more of an ugly orange and brown spots.
Yep.
Let's see what Carol has something. So we've been growing red oaks in our. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's good for you, Carol. You want me to come up here and give a lecture in your classroom sometime? Let me know. I used to do that. We used to do classes with preschool students all the time. And I love doing that because they're always so, they want to know stuff. They're so curious about things, and they're not all jaded and and have opinions one way or the other. Abe Lincoln said that about the internet. I'm sure that's true, Tina. But anyway, we used to have. I have a friend that created a program for school age kids. If you're ever interested for Earth Day and that sort of thing, Carol, if you're ever interested, I can ask her if she's got any, maybe like the class worksheet. And we, they would do, some of the schools around here would do like a week long thing for Earth Day. And we would go to their school and do this class, and it'd take 4 or 5 hours. And we mostly did preschool, or she did. It was just an outreach thing we got into for a while. And I think we did some classes up to like the second grade, maybe, or maybe third, but I don't think so. They're starting to get pretty rowdy at that point. but the kids loved it. They just eat that stuff up. We would grow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most species out there seem to prefer white oak acorns, or as I call them, oak nuts, because they have less tannic acid. At least that's what I've always heard. They have less tannic acid. They're not as bitter as some of the other acorns. And when we have white oak mass crops down here that fail, we have serious wildlife problems usually. I'll work on that, Carol. I'll see if I can't get that for you. I'm pretty sure she'd be more than willing to, send you a curriculum, if you will. That might be a better term for it, but I mean, like I said, it wasn't a huge thing. She would usually go out to the schools and talk to the teachers and aides and whatnot, and maybe talk to the classes a little bit a few days before we would go, and we would go set up these stations, and the kids would work around each station. What we're saying now?
Squirrels.
Oh. Here, okay.
No, Tina talking about we managed to get a squirrel in about every 10 minutes.
Hey, who said we're the squirrel monitor today? We don't need anybody counting our squirrels. Okay, well, let me move on here. Let's talk about some other fish. Now, here's a good one and a bad one. This top guy up here is a bowfin, and I don't know how far they're spread, but we have them here more out west than east in my state. Mark was talking about them. They had them in Arkansas. They're kind of a primitive fish too.
They go all the way to New York and Michigan, and yeah,
and they got tushes too. Some of them got
they'll hurt you
fangs, and they will bite you.
That's like a bulldog fish there.
Yeah,
and I've literally seen them crush fishing lures.
Really?
Like a bass plug.
Yeah.
They bite them, and they got enough force in their jaws, they'll actually crush one of those, which is amazing to me.
And they're a native fish, so they didn't get brought in and dropped off. I thought the neatest thing I ever saw was we used to, for a while I had like the best office in the world. It was out in the country. It was an old fish lab area, and it had a pond in between the front offices and the back offices where I worked. I mean, it was literally a freshwater pond about the size of my room here, probably. And it was rock lined and rock walled, and what they would do is the fish heads, the fish workers that went out actually and collected species out of the streams and whatnot, used to try to keep stuff in it that were all native species, to the area or the state. And for a while we had some bowfin in there, 2 or 3, not many, but a few. And once a week, somebody would come by, somebody that sold minnows, like at the fish docks and stuff. they'd bring their truck by and they'd give us they'd put a few buckets full of minnows in there for all the different game species of fish to eat. And we had bass in there and like I said, we had a few bowfin, and I had a lake trout or two at one time in there, which wasn't native, but we had some in there. Crappie, just things like that. Every species of bass we had in the state, largemouth, smallmouth, Kentucky bass, that sort of stuff. And but what was cool, and most of them those minnows will dump out in the water and they'll kind of school up and run around, and the fish will just sort of attack and grab them and eat them and grab another one. But not the bowfin. The bowfin would corral them and herd them, and they would get a patch of them and they would circle, and they would circle the minnows until they got them kind of isolated, and then they would just cut and slash through that little wad of minnows and just wreak death and devastation amongst them. They hunted. It was wild. I don't know if you've ever seen them do that, but it was amazing. A couple of them might even do it. They'd just circle around them and get a ball of minnows in this little area, in one end of the pond, and then they would just go through them and grab them and just rip them. I mean, they would really, and they could eat a pile of minnows pretty quick that way. But that's the only freshwater fish I've ever seen do that. It would really
sounds like dolphins and
mullet. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But dolphins do that. You've seen it, and later in life, I saw them push them up on the shoreline in Florida before. They would do that circling thing and get the mud up and water bubbles, and they would push them into the shore. And then I've seen them slap them up on the shore to catch them.
And then chase them clear up in the sand.
Yeah, they sure would. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, I mean, I'm missing out on some great conversation, I think, here. Oh, I love the Scarlet. Carol said she loves the squirrels in these shows. It's me too, Carol. Some of the most interesting facts come out of the squirrel conversation. That's why I tend not to have real set hard programs, because sometimes the squirrels are a lot more fun to chase, and sometimes they bring out very interesting, sometimes little known, but sometimes very important facts. Yes, Tina, I've seen the humpbacks and some of the baleen whales do that bubble fishing thing. That's amazing too. And I mean, they're serious about it. When you're the size of a whale, you got to be pretty serious about it. Okay, next squirrel is this This fish at the bottom is called a snakehead. And Mark, you can help. Maybe you can help me with this. I always thought snakeheads came out of the pet trade and got released in some places. And there was a time when I thought they had them fairly isolated, and they may still have in some states, but I know they really work to keep them out of anywhere down here.
So
but they're evidently pretty heavy in Florida waters now.
And they were pet trade fish, and they were Asian food fish. And we've had several. Florida's had several illegal introductions.
Yeah.
Specifically to raise them for the Asian food market. And I don't mean to be picking on Asians, but they're the ones that really wanted those fish, because
they're from
they're an Asian fish, and they there were some entrepreneurial tendencies by some folks that were originally from Laos or Vietnam or whatever, and they were releasing them intentionally to raise them for food, and not knowing or caring about what that might do to the local systems. And there's at least 2 species in Florida, maybe 3.
Of snakeheads or different fish?
Snakeheads.
Oh, I didn't know there were multiple species. Okay.
Yeah, some of them are like great big, and they're having some pretty, there's people that I don't know what they call them there, because they they have the ability to kind of semi live out of the water.
Yeah, they can live out of the water for a long time. That's one of the
And go from one water body to another
Yeah.
water body. There are people that have, given them superpowers and say that, they're going to kill all the humans on the planet or whatever. But one of the species gets very large and they are super hyper predators. I mean, they're really good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had big impacts to Florida's waters, especially. I think Maryland's having problems with them.
Maryland is another place where I remember reading about them. Yeah,
Virginia maybe, and yeah. Anyway, they're a really cool looking fish, and I guess they're a lot of fun to catch. But they're having pretty big impacts to frog species and other fish species and snakes, aquatic snakes, and they eat everything.
Dave, there is a squirrel fish. It's saltwater, or the one that I know is saltwater anyway. Or maybe that's a nickname from the pet trade, but I'm pretty sure I've seen squirrel fish. But if there's not, we'll make one.
Yeah, right here it is.
This is an example of people making introductions, probably not in a malicious sense, because honestly, and this is not knocking anybody, most people don't. I'm going to say most people don't put the links in the chain together that really make up an ecosystem. Because basically the way ecosystems work is they strive to get to a balance point where all the normal species are there. One thing feeds on another, right down to the tiniest creature out there to the biggest ones. And when you introduce a ravenous predator like snakeheads, that just turns the whole thing upside down. And unfortunately, what they tend to do is prey on all the native species because, one, the native species don't have any defensive guards against snakeheads because they never had to deal with them, so they haven't evolved any tactics to avoid them. And the snakeheads have no predators, enemies per se, so they multiply like crazy, which this applies to other things as well. But it's one of the things that makes them wrong, and it throws off the entire freshwater ecosystems. Like Mark was saying, they eat frogs, they eat aquatic snakes, and even if you don't like snake or aquatic dwelling snakes, even if you don't like snakes or you're afraid of snakes, they're still part of the system, and you can't maintain any balance in an ecosystem if you throw it all out one way or the other. And like it or not, most native species, be it a snake or a mouse or a bird, they have a niche that they fill within your ecosystem, and when you disrupt it, it just turns the whole world upside down for those species. And sometimes those native species disappear, which is a real shame. I think we're talking about what you guys need to chase your squirrels over here in public more. I can't keep up.
Well, and you're right, Kay. You talking about kudzu? We used in the South. We always had these nice ivies and things that grew up trees, and we've got. I don't know how long. I don't remember when they introduced kudzu, but it's an awful plant, and we're stuck with it. I mean, it
is very hard to get rid of once you have it too. It's and I think probably there was a time when I always thought it was just an ornamental thing that got over here, and then I heard it was brought in to prevent erosion, which it doesn't work very well for. It's got really deep roots and holds on like hell won't have it, but it doesn't really protect the surface soil. It just gets down below that, and the surface soil will still wash.
It's good at killing trees.
It's good at killing trees. We had a guy come to us who was studying kudzu, and he figured out that kudzu. This is a squirrel, but Kay or Tina, this is your fault. Whoever, the kudzu can't climb a tree a pole or a tree, if it's over 8 inches in diameter, it can't hold itself up. So he found out that you could wrap this plastic around the bottom of a telephone pole, for example, to keep it off the lines, and it couldn't get up past, like, you had to cover it from so many feet up, and it literally cannot climb high enough to do that because it can't get a good purchase on that plastic, I suppose. And if you really look, the way kudzu really spreads is it'll climb up a vine or get a low limb, and then once it gets in the tree, it just goes all the way to the top and covers the tree and kills the tree and spreads all over everything. And you know, it can live there forever because it's got roots in the ground and catching all the sunlight from above. And they're really hard to get rid of. We worked real hard on some areas trying to get rid of some on our property. About the only way the only way I was ever successful in getting rid of some was to keep it, if it was in a place where we could literally keep it mowed constantly, bush hogged or whatever, it never got big enough. And if you can do that for several years in a row, and that's pretty big ass sometimes, it can actually kill the roots because you don't let it get enough sunlight to survive. It doesn't get enough leaves and sunlight to photosynthesize enough food to live. And that was one way you could get rid of it. But poisoning it just really doesn't work. I mean, it'll knock it back maybe one season, but then it comes right back because it just won't kill the roots. Human intervention strikes again. It's like somebody once said, to really screw things up, calling the government. Well, yeah, sometimes that might be true. It's not always the government, but sometimes that's true. What else is Kay saying here? Tina's not one of them. My kids used to talk about kudzu in the mountains. They'd say, "Oh, look, it's like topiaries in the trees." I guess it kind of is, but it's bad stuff. It's another thing you don't think about much, but English ivy, can get out from a house and it'll spread all through a wood patch too and kill off other ivies. It won't kill everything so bad like kudzu will. For one thing, it doesn't grow as fast. Kudzu grows like an inch a day, and I mean it can cover up stuff in a real hurry, but English ivy is not as bad, but it is not good. I mean, it's still a bad thing to have loose in your woodlot. Okay, next picture. So anyway, that's snake fishing. There are people in Florida actively trying to catch and get rid of as many of those as they can, but they'll never get them all. They might be.
I mean, if you fish in Florida and you catch one of those, it's mandatory. You got to kill it.
Yeah, you can't turn it loose.
You don't have to eat it, but you got to kill it.
And that's what they've done in ponds and things. I think Maryland a few years ago, one of the things I heard about that was when they would find one in a pond, they would basically nuke that pond to get rid of them because they just did not want them getting out. Yeah, it's like bamboo, Tina. Only it won't get under your fingernails like bamboo, but it grows very fast. And somebody told me one time they called it the foot-a-day plant, but I don't think it grows that much, but it grows. Let's see, Kay said it.
Your mind works in mysterious ways. It won't get under your fingernails like bamboo.
Well, torture, bamboo torture.
I know exactly what you're talking.
It definitely doesn't die out. They have tried to burn it, poison it, but no. Yeah. You can practically hear it grow. I swear you can. The only redeeming quality that kudzu has, and this is not even good quality. I mean, it shouldn't be, but the only thing I've ever found about kudzu that I could appreciate was when it flowers. When it blooms, they have little purple flowers that hang down that remind me, they smell like grape Kool-Aid. And most people I know, like foresters and things, they'll look at me like, "Oh, you got 3 heads, and what's wrong with you, boy?" And they'll tell you right fast, there ain't nothing good about kudzu.
A great Kool-Aid.
It does. Have you ever smelled it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it kind of does to me. It might not to you. But and here's the other another invasive species that is in Florida. And I guess this one's perhaps even more controversial. And I just noticed something. The guy that's standing there holding that one, this is a peacock bass, and these guys are out of South America, or northern South America at least. I know I used to see fishing shows where they would go to like Venezuela and fish for these things because they're great to fish for and catch. They're, from a sport fishing standpoint, they're amazing, and they're probably good to eat. I don't know, but they're probably much like bass here. As far as I know, they're in the same genre or genera or whatever. I just noticed that guy. There's a buoy line behind him, and I just wonder if that's a net to try to keep some back in that cove. Yeah. I don't know if it would be or not, but it might be. But these guys are also taking off down there, and these were probably introduced on purpose by somebody because they thought it'd be a great sport fish to have in Florida. I don't know. Mark may know. I don't know if the state did that. It's possible.
No,
most likely
I think this was a bait bucket Charlie brought in because he wanted to catch these local,
Yeah, and
we've had several of those in Wyoming.
Yeah. Oh, it happens here too.
People helping,
Yeah.
Because
wouldn't it be great if we had that here?
What would it hurt if you brought that species on this side of the divide compared to where it's native?
Exactly. And we have that here. People will do that here. They'll catch something, and it won't exist in the next reservoir, and they'll start putting it in on their own.
And they're helping. I mean, that's how they look. That's how they look at it.
Yeah, they think they're helping because they assume that if the state isn't doing it, they probably don't have the money. So we'll help out. I mean, there's all kinds of justifications people give for this. And some of them will just flat say, well, we like to catch them and eat them, or we just like to catch them, so we're letting them loose.
Right.
Yeah. If they catch them doing it, a lot of times, depending on what it is, they can really nail their hide. But most of the time, they don't get caught. I mean, you can't check everybody's bait bucket. And that's literally how some of them do it. They'll even school up a bunch of fish of a certain kind. They'll seine them up out of a creek or another reservoir, and they'll dump them in another lake, and then you got them up there. There's a lot not far from the house. I think we're still talking kudzu there. From the house, it has a pole with the ground wire going. Yep. Goes from Scooby-Doo. Yeah, they'll climb up that. That's the thing about poles. And again, they'll climb up that guy wire until they get up into the top of the pole, and then they'll just spread out on all the wires up there and move into. And if that gets close enough to a tree, they'll latch onto the tree limbs, and then they just cover. I mean, it's an aggressive, terrible thing, and it is so difficult to get rid of, and it's just really bad on foresters and forestry people. Absolutely hate it. Oh, I get it, Kay. I've seen it. I know exactly what you're talking about. Hey, Tundra Road King. Good to see you. And now I can't remember your name. Save me. I used to know it. Unfortunately, LA Florida Fish and Wildlife introduced them for fishing. Well, they may have, and that's why I'm not sure about that. Because, again, that's something that happens. And there's usually more to it than that. Like up here in Tennessee, they had pressure at one time to release some striped bass in some reservoirs. And then some people decided that was not good because they were eating crappie. And we had a turf war for a while up here between crappie fishermen and striped bass fishermen. And even though scientifically they proved it in that case, the striped bass didn't eat crappie or crappie minnows, it was still a war. They were not going to let up. Uncas, is there any chance you can scoot over a little bit? Because I've lost you. I just see a silhouette of what you once were. That's better. That's getting better. Okay, so anyway, and this is another there's people that really like to fish for these. There's also a whole group of people in Florida now that like to bow fish for them, so they can. And I don't know. I don't know that this is trying to get rid of this as nearly as much as snakeheads, but these people that do bowfish for them usually throw them up on the bank. They don't put them back in because again, what somebody thought was a really great idea, and it may have been the fishing game department or the freshwater fish department down there. Once they take off, it flips the whole ecosystem over. And we'll go back to the gar here for a minute and wonder about things. That this upper right hand corner picture, if you can see it, is a close up of the scale pattern and the scales of a gar. And you see how tight packed they are. And even that's kind of deceiving. And the image in the lower right hand corner is a fossilized gar or a piece of skin from a gar. And you can see how the scales are formed and all that. And then over on the left hand side of the page, you'll see how some natives actually used them, or back, I don't know how many thousands or millions of years old these are, but they used them to make fish hook or fishing lures. There's a whole world of people out there now, I didn't know this, that make all kinds of art with them. Some beautiful flowers that they can take and mold and take these scales and form, circles. And I mean, I was actually go on Etsy sometime and look them up. There's lots of them. The middle picture is what I found really fascinating. That person in the blue sandals there is standing on a mound of gar scales. I don't know if it said how deep or how big or wide or tall it was, but that's like I think it was like a midden or an area where maybe where the one long time ago natives cleaned their fish or used the scales or something, but there's a pile of them there. And they find things like this sometimes. I know they found middens that were full of like freshwater mussel shells, for example. And, in an area where there may have been a town along the river and where they fished and caught mussels and that sort of stuff for food. And they just piled all the shells up in the same place. And over time, they disappear and then they get dug up and, wow, look what we found. So they're kind of, I think it's pretty fascinating. But I also thought, I mean, look what arrow points they made here. And they're probably, these are probably bird points or maybe small game points. But I'll tell you, gar
They'll kill a deer.
Well, yeah, they're pretty tough. I mean, they are really tough, which Mark and I learned when we started shooting these things. The arrows were literally bounce off a gar. Their scales are that tough, and they're thick, and that's what we were talking about earlier. I've shot a few. I've never had any success really cleaning one because you can't hardly cut them. I mean, a good saw won't hardly cut them, and a knife will just dull itself almost instantly. But as he said, and I found out today or last night, there is a way to get to the meat, and most people use like metal snips to cut the skin, and then you can peel it back and get to it. But when they peel it back, that's like a sheet of armor. I mean, I could see how someone might take that in an earlier age and dry it and then form it on their arm, for example, to make armor to protect themselves from Joe down the street that that wants to take over your territory or something. And I read somewhere that some of this was one way they think that chainmail was created because they looked at this plating. I mean, I'm not kidding. These things are tough. They're really hard. You can take a bow that will drive an arrow through a deer, straight through a deer, and it might bounce off a gar if you don't hit him just right. They're really these.
Well, and they're bone. I mean, they're
bone. That's true. Yeah, they're not just like regular scales on most fish. They're bone. Well, I don't know. I guess most of them are bone, but these are tough. And this was the last shot I put in here because I thought, well, this is a nice shot. And this guy's using a compound bow, but he's bow fishing, and he's got looks like he might have one of those old what do you call them, stingers? With the flip
stingery.
Stingery, maybe because it's open right there. But I thought, well, that's a nice sunset picture. So that's the last of my slides. But don't go away yet. I do have a couple more that I forgot to put in here for some reason. And let me see if I can pull those up, because I've got some amazing pictures of gar and things that I forgot to put in that if you've never seen one like this, you might be quite amazed. I tell you what, here's a good one. I'll start with this one. And I may just run through some and then we'll just skip over the ones that aren't interesting. But here's one that was taken, quite a while back. And there may be some optical illusion, but it's pretty close. This one is over 10 feet long, it said. Hey, Pook. All right, hang on here. We're going into a wormhole through a time warp again. But look at that mother.
Yeah, that's a fish.
That's a big old alligator gar there. Now that one, I'm like you. If that thing popped up beside me off the bottom of the river, I'd probably be levitating out of there too.
Mine was probably would have been, if you took the head off that fish, it would have been about that long, and that was long enough. and I have no idea. I mean, they say those big fish like that are ancient.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what their lifespan is, but
I don't think they live as long as sturgeon, but they live a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, sturgeon can live to be well over 100, maybe even a couple of hundred, but these guys all. Hey, Yachty, I meant to say hi before I forgot. I just saw you pop in there. Good to see you. Okay, something's pliable. Oh yeah, Tina, that's very true. It was flexible. It moved much easier than plate armor. You're absolutely correct. Let me get this other thing out of my way here. Anyway, that's a big old gar. That's a big old alligator gar. And there's another one of those fishing boats I was talking about. That one's got a sponsorship on it. Actually, that may be a guide boat because it says somebody's Ames bow fishing. So that might be somebody you can hire to take you out with it. Look at all the LED lights around that thing. It's oh wow, that's got an airboat and a pusher on it.
Yeah.
That guy's ready for anything. That's the fish heads. There's one. There's another one that's either a sponsorship or he's got a business to take people out bow fishing. There's a big old alligator gar.
That's about the size of the one that came up beside me.
You could have hopped on him and rode.
And I wasn't ready for that.
I bet you weren't.
Well, number one, I thought it was just a submerged log to begin with. So.
Till it swam up by you.
Until it come up and put its big head out of the water.
Jeez, you'd have to, if you didn't know what it was, I could see how you might think it was an alligator.
Yeah.
That's those fossilized scales. Mark, you said you find these, don't you? Out?
Yeah, these are real common right here around the house. We don't usually find them in sheets like that, which would be really cool. They're usually just the individual scale.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a question before you change the subject. If you find these all the time, why the heck don't I have one?
Well, I'll send you some.
I didn't know you guys had these. I'm kidding, but I didn't know you guys had these out there. But you find all kinds of stuff, so I shouldn't be surprised. There's a pretty nice one for your average run-of-the-mill gar. That one, that's a big short nose. I'm not sure actually. And I don't have, unfortunately, I didn't tag it, so I don't know.
I think it's probably a gator.
Yeah, it probably is. It's just not full growed. Look at this, Mark. This is a new fishing rig that put out line, and we were getting close to this.
We almost invented that.
We almost invented that because that's line in a plastic bottle.
Right.
instead of a spool, and it comes out here, of course, on the arrow and feeds out from here. And I don't know, it may have a crank here, but I'm not sure about that. But we almost got to that point. We just worked a little hard, had a little more imagination. That's the scales. There's more fish. And here's a bunch of guys with fish of various kinds. And I don't know. I think these are bow fishers too, tournaments, but I'm not positive. Looks like most
Carp.
but
yep.
There's a couple of young men with a big old gar. I doubt they caught it by hand, but they got it up there somehow. Well, that's a pretty good size one there. There's a nice airboat in his element. And they will run on that grass right there, just like it was on water. That's a pretty fancy airboat. Yeah, that guy's got outriggers on that thing.
Yep.
There's a good picture of a bowfin. Yeah, I messed it up. I was trying to figure out how to make it. I was trying to figure out how to get rid of all this stuff along the bottom here. And this is just identifying marks on the boat. But now, here's fishing at night. And I thought this was pretty cool because you can really see them stacked up down there. I just realized he's just released that arrow too, because you can tell it just left the bowstring. It's about 5 or 6 inches off the bow shell or arrow shell. Canoe fishing, standing up. Fred himself. That must be an aquarium somewhere. And I know the Tennessee aquarium has some big gar in it. Another comparison between a bowfin and a snakehead. Maybe trying to tell people the difference so they know. And where archery is an adventure. Look at this man. I mean, he's probably all muscle and sinew, but he's not very big.
That was a good shot of the missing finger.
Oh, was
it? If you look
yeah, right there.
Right there. That's why he shot left-handed.
Gotcha.
He was a whippet, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was a tough old bird, though. Evidently. There's that skeleton. That's a little better picture of that because it's bigger. And that I'm going to call it a tenderloin strap. It's not really a tenderloin, I guess, but it lays right above these rib bones and right along that spine. And if you can get that out without breaking all these little rib bones off in it, you probably got a pretty clean piece of meat.
Yeah, it's good too. It's just they're a pain to, but that showed how when you clean them, that piece of hide, that's one piece.
I wonder if you could tan that.
So you open them up along the belly, look just like that's done, and then you just basically peel them out of there.
Down.
I don't think you need to tan it.
You may not have to. There's just more examples.
There's not enough hide on it. It's mostly those bone osteoderms like these guys.
And this one's got a note on it where it was found and when, 1929, along the Merrimack River near St. Louis, Missouri, with a burial. Gar scales found by Chuck Adams in about 1929. So he did find a cache of them. So they did bury them with them at times, or for whatever.
So they were using those as arrow points.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they look at them; they're almost perfect.
Yep.
And that's just another flat bottom fishing boat. There's that guy again. No, never mind. I'm not going to do it. I was going to see if I had the metadata on it or whatever it told where that guy was at. Oh, I like this. And when we ever do a Fred Bear or more of a bow hunt and archery morning. I'm going to bring in. He's got some. There were some really good quotes, and I knew you'd like this one. It says a hunt based only on trophies taken falls far short of what the ultimate goal should be. Fred himself.
Amen.
We had a workboat that looked about like that.
I need one of those.
Yeah, that's pretty good boats. We had one. We actually had one about like that last squirrel. We had one about like this, except it had a side console and it was set up to also fit. Somehow we ended up with it for a workboat, which I didn't think it's worth a dang for a workboat because it wasn't with that floor in it and everything. You didn't have enough room to stack stuff, put real tools and stuff in it. But it was a nice boat. That's that guy standing up again. He's probably got a bunch of carp up in those grasses. Another snakehead picture. And here's one of the signs I was talking about earlier. This is one of the places where they were doing a bow fishing championship, and it was organic fish fertilizer. All the fish from this tournament are donated to SF Organics, creating a healthy fertilizer for use by organic farmers. I guess that makes sense, unless the fish are full of mercury and other kinds of contaminants. Yeah. Squirrel. Are you counting squirrels, Tim? Because if you are, I want to know the number when we're finished.
We ate quite a bit of the fish.
In most of the places you can. You know how. And
then when I worked in Kentucky, whenever they'd have one of those big tournaments, we would take the fish and put them at the eagle nests.
Yeah.
And donate them to the bald eagles.
Right, which is a worthy cause. I like this Fred Bear quote too. It says, "Go afield with a good attitude, with respect for the wildlife you hunt and for the forest and fields in which you walk. Immerse yourself in the outdoor experience. It will cleanse your soul and make you a better person." I would agree with that too. I'm not sure what that is. I thought it might be is that a snakefish, another snakehead?
I don't know. It's kind of gross looking.
Yeah, it is. I'm not sure. There's maybe a little bit better picture of those silver carp. That's a big head carp there. That's a pretty good sized fellow too. That was another state record, I believe. There's a mouthful of teeth in there. Well, he might have caught that guy on a fishing pole. Yeah, in fact, he may have caught that on a big fly rod. There's some kind of bug in its mouth. That'd be a fight.
Boy, howdy.
There's a young lady fishing with a wheelbow or a compound, and she's, I picked this picture. I didn't use it, but I picked this because she was so young. I mean, kids. This is another way to get kids interested in archery and shooting bows and that sort of thing. Is that my last picture? Must be. Well, anyway. Whoops. I need to go down here and do this first. Yeah, I guess that was my last one I had gathered up for this. So anyway, that's kind of where it was at. We wanted to talk about garping and we just had lots of fun doing it. I mean, it was we look back on it now, and even that river trip from hell where we walked through Africa to get back to the house.
Wonderful day.
Was still a wonderful day. Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't have changed it for nothing. And it was just.
I still remember going around the corner just as Brenda's driving away. and seeing nothing but sand. And like, wait, come back.
Shane, come back, Shane. It's from a movie, in case anybody doesn't pick it up. Anybody know the name of that movie? Or was that the name of that movie? Or who?
Shane. It was Shane. The name of the movie was Shane.
Who was the star in that movie? It wasn't Gary Cooper.
Alan Ladd.
Yeah.
I think.
I'm pretty sure you're right. Not that we've ever been known to watch old movies or anything. 6 squirrels. Tina, I'm not sure that's right, but I'll take your word for it. It seems like there's been more than that.
I thought we had way more than that today.
Standing in a canoe is one of those things I'm pretty sure my camp director warned me against. Well, probably, Tina. But we
got wet every now and again.
Well, yeah, but not too often. Not most of the time. It's when we wanted to get wet.
I remember you had that little short.
Oh, now that time I got wet and I didn't want to get wet. In fact, I got wet twice in that canoe.
I think you drowned a camera on that day.
I drowned a very good pair of binoculars.
Binoculars, that's what it was. Yeah, very good pair.
After that, I started trying to buy waterproof binoculars. That ruined my Nikon binoculars, which were the best compact binoculars I ever had.
Yeah,
they went right to the right into. I gotta tell a story on myself about canoeing and standing up. See, Car Carol's got here a squirrel, there a squirrel, everywhere a squirrel, squirrel. I'm going to change my show name to Chasing Squirrels with Mark and Tim. One time when I was working at TVA, somebody decided, but we had somebody in our shop that was doing we had watershed people that did erosion kind of projects, and I worked with at that time with we did plantings and things for wildlife, and just we had different things going on. And this lady had done a project on a big shore bank of the river that was sloughing off really bad, so she'd gone down there and done some biostabilization with root wads and logs and plantings on it and that kind of thing, as opposed to just rip wrapping it all. They did have to put some gabion baskets in with rocks, but very little. But anyway, so they decided to do an outing for our office. Everybody in the office that wanted to could, go along, and we had a bunch of canoes for that kind of thing. And we went and got the canoes and put them in the water. And my buddy, my mentor, Steve Cottrell, said, "I'm going with you." And I said, "That's fine," because he knew I'd been in a canoe. I mean, he had too, but he wasn't, one thing, he didn't want to be responsible, so he wasn't going to ride in the back. He wanted me to have to drive and steer and all that. And because he likes to sit and talk and point at things. So so that worked out, but it didn't work out because our main regional manager showed up. Now, this guy's like, vice president kind of person in the agency. And he was a big guy. He was 6 foot something tall and pretty good size, and didn't swim, couldn't swim. I learned later, didn't know that at the time, but he was not real sure about being in a canoe. And my other boss, my local manager, decided that Russell was his name, that Russell should go with me because I was a little bit closer to his size, even though I was smaller back then. But, and I had been in a canoe, and Russell had never been in a canoe, but he was going to go along with us. And I was like, oh my God, this is not what I'm signed on for. I don't want the regional manager / vice president, the guy that's responsible for maybe giving me a full-time job. I was still a contractor then, but I got to take Russell. So we put our lunch buckets in the bottom of the canoe and whatever else we had with us. And we started down the river. Well, that river was also at certain times of the year could get pretty low, or when they weren't running water, it was just below North Dam. So it was somewhat dependent on how much water they were letting through the generators and stuff. And the best time to hit it was just as they started turning on a generator, and you could pretty much get all the way down to what we call the 61 highway bridge, which is several miles below where we were. But if you didn't do that, you were going to do a little bit of walking or pulling. And along the way, there were several little ripples or ledges. You know how rivers are up here. There's ledges, and you have to, go over them or go around them or if you're out wading, you'll scrape all the hide off your shins. She wants to know if you painted that moose picture. John wants to know that about.
Do what?
He'll tell you in just a minute, John. That moose picture.
You stopped your story.
I stepped on my laugh, didn't I?
You did.
Okay, John, hang on. Hold that thought, John. So
I
anyway,
did.
so we're going down the river, and we all got life jackets on because that was mandatory. And Russell was a little bit nervous, so every time we kind of came to a riffle, he was like, "Oh, you sure this is okay?" And I said, "Yeah, we're fine. Just get up a little speed, and we'll just go right through this. It won't be a problem." And we didn't have any trouble. But as I am wont to do, we got to places where we might be ahead, and we're waiting on other people to catch up. And I stood up in my boat. Well, that just freaked everybody out. Hey, Cherie, welcome. And of course, we didn't have any problem with that. Although everybody said, "Oh, you stood up in your boat. You're not supposed to do that." And I didn't have any problem. And I was paddling, standing up, and we were just cruising. It was a nice little trip. Well, we got down almost to the end. And lo and behold, here's a little shelf that goes all the way across the river. And it drops off about this far, probably 6 or 8 inches anyway. Just dropped right off. The water hadn't come up that high yet. And Russell's like, "Oh God, we're gonna be able to get across that? That looks bad." I said, "Here's what we're gonna do, Russell. We're just gonna paddle like hell, and we're gonna just pop right over that thing." I said, "It'll be fine." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Okay, if you think we can do it." So we did, and we just paddled along through there, and we popped right over, and we were through. Well, everybody else was coming. He said, "Wait right here." He said, "I want to make sure everybody else gets through it all right." So I stopped the canoe and was just kind of holding us there. And you know how you and I used to do this, and we've done this a lot. We used to sit on the seat in the back of the canoe, kind of ready to step out of the boat if we had to. If we got in shallow water or the boat tipped over a little bit or something, we'd just step out and get a hold of the boat or stand there. It was just a reaction. We just do it. We did it all the time.
Yep.
So we're sitting there, and I'm kind of sitting like that, kind of at an angle with my legs in that position. I could get out if I needed to. And he said, "Here, wait right here." He said, "We're going to watch." So I stopped the boat. Well, he turned and leaned to look at the people coming over the rocks, and we flipped over. And as soon as we did, the current got in the boat, and of course it just swamped it. Well, I stepped out of the boat, and it was about up to the bottom of my shorts. It didn't get above. I didn't get any wetter than that. And I just stepped off the boat and got a hold of the canoe. And well, that's when I found out Russell couldn't swim.
Oh, hell.
So I grabbed him. I realized he wasn't coming up, and he was in front of me at the front of the boat. And I'm trying to hang on to the canoe and trying to grab him by the collar and get his head above water. And I'm not kidding you. He was well over 200 pounds and 6 foot something tall. I mean, he was a big man. He's like a linebacker in football or something. And it took everything. And he was my he was my manager, my supreme manager. And I had to pull him out of the water. Well, he lost his sunglasses, his prescription sunglasses. His lunch got soaked. He went way underwater, a couple of times. And he's soaked from head to foot. And I'm standing there with the bottom of my shorts down.
Right.
And I'm just, because it wasn't scary to me. It just happened. It happened quick. And it took me a little while to figure out what had happened. But he rolled over to look, and he just rolled the canoe over just enough to it caught water, and I couldn't stop it. And he still hired me. A year or so later, he actually hired me. I told him, I said, "I didn't think you would after all that." And that's what everybody told me. He said, "Oh, hell, you'll never get hired now." I said, "After you dumped the regional manager, there's no way you're going to get a job." I said, "Well, I did dump him. I didn't dump him. I never did say I dumped him. I said, well, he did go in the water, but I pulled him out. That's got to count for something." But that was another exciting little trip. And his lunch was ruined. I felt really bad about that. His sandwich was soggy. He had a sandwich or two wrapped up in bags, and they were just full of water. It was quite the trip. I felt bad about his glasses. He had prescription sunglasses, and they were gone. Anyway, yes, John, Mark is painting that moose, so now you can answer him.
In the process of. In the process of.
Move over just a little bit, and he can see more of it, maybe.
Which
Unless
way?
you don't want him to.
I don't care.
You've added some stuff since I saw it.
It's foggy. It's a foggy deal. It was Christmas Day. It was a Christmas Day moose. It was really. We had that freezing fog stuff going on, and that bull was running down through the willows on the other side of the river here. And anyway, it inspired me.
I get it. Well, it's looking good. And that was this year, right?
A couple years ago. Yeah.
Well, you guys, I don't know if you guys remember the pictures. I had a few pictures early on. Mark's had moose in his yard. He gets mule deer in his yard. I guess I guess you got any antelope in your yard. Do you ever get antelope up there?
We have antelope all around us, but they don't ever come on the property. We're just not.
Okay.
Well, we've got kind of nasty fences to begin with, net wire, sheep.
Okay, yeah.
And so that kind of keeps them out. But I see them right at the southeast corner of our property all the time. But they're not. They're not here now. They're only up in this country in the summertime. Right now, they're about 30 miles east of here.
How bad do you think? How bad is this winter in relationship to what it'll do to the populations?
It's going to be. It's been pretty mild. I mean, all in all, I think our winter losses will be pretty modest.
Tina, you're in New York, and I know Carol's in Michigan. Dave, if he's still here, was a Michigander when he was growing up. Do you guys know, have you ever heard anybody, I don't know if you grew up around deer hunters or not, but up in that country, sometimes they have a problem with deer yarding. They have deer yards, which are almost, I won't say almost, traditional is probably not the right word, but there's areas where deer will yard up in the wintertime, and they tend to go to the same areas and do it year after year. And they tend to, if the populations get too high, they'll get in these thick copes of trees and whatnot to stay warm or try to stay out of some of the weather. And they'll eat all the browse they can find as far as they can reach in the trees and stuff. And then they'll have a die-off sometimes, and they call those deer yards. And I've talked to other people that grew up in the Northeast, and they talk about deer yards. That was something we never had down here, or at least not that I know of. And of course,
we didn't have them at all.
When I grew up, we didn't have any deer to speak of. So,
but the deer we had, I mean, they're non-migratory where we grew up.
Well, that's true too. Yeah,
they don't go from summer range to winter range.
No, not like yours do. And I guess they do some of that in the Northeast too. I mean, they'd almost have to.
But I mean, those yards are, a lot of times it's a tamarack swamp or something.
Yeah.
And they go in there and like you were saying, they use them year after year after year, and they can out-browse themselves every now and again. But
yeah, they can just eat themselves out of a place to live.
Yep.
If you ever go into a patch of woods and you look and you notice that there's, it looks like a park, or at least sometimes, and you can see under the trees and it's all kind of cleared out, but it's not really where somebody does that. A lot of times that's deer browse. That's the browse line.
Pennsylvania is the worst place I ever been for that. Like, you can just look through the woods, where we grew up. Woods had like multiple stories.
Yeah.
Some of them were so thick you couldn't see through them. And Pennsylvania always reminded me of a city park. Looking at it, just kind of.
Oh, but yeah, right. Because that's
because there's so many deer. Yep.
And Pennsylvania was always. I can remember when Pennsylvania had more deer harvested. In fact, I remember a time when they had more deer killed on the highway each year by cars than they harvested by hunters.
Right.
And they had truth is, the carp killing was probably keeping the population somewhat in check. But I mean, and that's a bad thing. Deer's hitting cars. We have more of that now since we have more deer now. John says we have that everywhere in South Jersey. Lots of cars hitting deer here, and we have coyotes and bald eagles here as well. Well, I'm not surprised you got coyotes. We got those, and I'm sure they just moved on up your way if they didn't get there first. Funny thing about coyotes, that's probably another story too. But somehow or another, they got here before they got in West Tennessee. And Tina says she's heard of it. It happens here. It hasn't happened much lately. Our snow isn't that bad. Yeah, that makes a difference too. I live in Deerfield. Good point. And it's appropriately named. We have deer at our bird feeders. Yes, deer will definitely get in your bird feeders. I'm almost surprised I don't have them here in my bird feeders.
I have a mule in mine.
Yeah. Mark has a mule named Gus, and Gus likes to get
Woodrow,
I mean, and he likes to get in Mark's bird feeders and empty them and step on them.
Yep.
You sent me a picture one time, and I don't
He's
know.
a piece of work. I'm glad he's not black. He'd look like that animal behind me.
Well, maybe that'd be a good thing. Somebody might take him out.
Yeah.
Accidentally, of course. No, I forgot what I was getting ready to say. Oh, you sent me a picture one time, and I don't remember if you took it or saw the animal or if somebody sent it to you guys like in your office, but it was a wolverine in Wyoming raiding a bird feeder, I believe, or the guy was complaining about
it was in a guy's bear bait.
Oh, it's in his bear bait. Okay, well, I'd do it too. That would do it.
Yeah, we get them. I mean, they're a super rare animal, but we have them all through this country. We had one road killed just about 20 miles west of the house here.
I can't imagine that.
And somebody stopped and said, "Hey, there's a road killed wolverine down, like laying." It was right by Fossil Butte National Monument, and it was like, no, there ain't no road killed wolverine, but yeah, it was. So,
is it too far gone to do anything with?
No, we have it. It's at the Green River office mounted.
Oh, cool.
It was a good, fresh critter. So,
That's Older Pair just showed up. Hey, Mike and Val, good to see you. I hope you're having a good Saturday. I saw your wine drinking festival, or not festival, but your in-house wine tasting. How would you call that? A remote wine tasting at home, or be like a Zoom wine tasting, maybe? I thought that's kind of a neat idea. That's probably a better answer, Tina. I'd probably hi Mike and say hi to Val. Always a pleasure, my friend. I got a bottle of Irish whiskey here. If you were here, I hadn't even cracked the seal on it yet. We'd share some of that. Mike has excellent taste in bourbons and whiskeys, I've learned. It was a lot of fun. Val had a bit too much wine for that night, though. Well, that'll happen. That can happen. I mean, if you're gonna do a wine tasting, you gotta have enough of it to, make sure you taste. You can't just, that sniff and swig stuff's not gonna get it. Oh, John's having a little bit of Jameson right now. Is it just is it like a fancy Jameson or just regular Jameson, which is good? One of my favorite right now. My favorite whiskey is still a Jameson Irish whiskey called Croser's Choice. Or Cooper's Cruise. That's the name of it. Very nice, very smooth. Somebody asked me how it tastes one time. I said it tastes smooth. That was good stuff, and I'm really sad because I hadn't been able to get any more. Nope, just regular. Well, there's nothing wrong with that either. I'll tell you what, somebody's a whiskey drinker or knows their whiskeys when you can hand them a blind glass and they can tell you that they know it's Irish whiskey and they can tell you what brand and the year and how old it is. And I saw a video one time where Pink, the musician, was being interviewed by some guy that writes for a magazine all about that sort of thing. Well, they have a vineyard. She has a vineyard in California, so I think they were there for that, interviewing her about her wines. But they handed her some blind glasses and said, "See if you can tell what any of these are." And she named every one of them, but she got one in particular, right? And it was Jameson Cooper's Cruise, 10-year-old, and she even nailed the date. She had she had well refined taste buds. I was very impressed, and even bigger fan after that. Anyway, we've talked about it, and we've chased some squirrels and all that. If anybody has any questions about bow fishing or any kind of wildlife management, like I said, I think we're going to do another. We'll do another morning about, and we'll talk about that and how hunting is used in wildlife management and why it is pretty much a necessity in this day and age that we do that, because even though I haven't hunted in years, I still don't have anything against it, and I would still do it again. I hope to do it again. I hope to do it in Wyoming. That's a big old hint there. But it is. I mean, you can't. Again, it's one of those cases where the system gets so out of balance if we don't have some we don't manage in some fashion like that it just gets all out of whack quick, and then the alternative for that is they start dying and starving, and disease sets in and quickly, and that's much worse than having people hunting. Mike says, "I'm always in the mood for Irish whiskey." I know what you mean. I have some. I don't know if I showed you that or not, Mark. I've got some Welsh whiskey here too.
Really?
Yeah, it's a bit like a Scotch. I mean, it's kind of a single malt kind of thing like Scotch, and it's kind of peaty.
Pretty peaty.
Pretty peaty. But it's I had to try it because I fly a Welsh flag.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. It's probably not my favorite, but it's not bad.
Well, you don't have your Kumro up today, or your?
I don't. I took them down today. For one thing, I wanted to see if you could that I have got finally got most of my office cleaned up. I'm ready to start working again. I've got projects now that I can start working on. I've got knife sheaths to make and hatchet sheath or two to make, and I'm gonna try to do a little gunsmithing and just a few other things like that. If I can make it work out, I'm gonna try anyway. I gator hunt each year, and wouldn't want to imagine how it'd be out of control gator population would get if we didn't have the. Yeah, do you have? They do that. When I left Florida, that was just alligators were just getting back to the point where. Well, actually, they were already to the point where they were super numerous and far more there. I mean, I can remember when we used to talk about being on the brink of extinction, and boy, did that change fast.
Yeah, that wasn't that long ago.
No, it was. Well, I mean, when I lived in Florida in the early 70s or mid 70s. It was. They didn't hunt them. I mean, you didn't have a season, and
they darn sure do now.
Oh yeah, well, they were just starting to talk about having to issue special permits for a few people, like professional hunters, to harvest some gators in troubled areas where they were having problems with them then, and it just kept getting worse and worse. Carol says, my new son-in-law is Irish. His Irish relatives came over for the wedding, but didn't bring any whiskey, I suppose we still like them. I don't know if I would or not, Carol. I mean, they came all the way over here and they didn't bring any, presents for the in-laws. Come on. What's their names? I'll write to them. I'll find, Timothy D. Pruitt, Esquire, barrister for Carkey, and say, where's the whiskey? I mean, that ought to have been part of the fee for him taking your daughter. That's just not right. You just can't put up with that, Carol. I'd let them know that they're on thin ice at least. I'd hint around a little bit. Anyway, where was I? That was a squirrel. Surely that was a squirrel. Oh, Mike. So when you say you hunt, is that are they shooting for a number each year? Are you given a permit to kill a certain number of gators, or you just have a license to go out and hunt a gator? How do they do that now? None. Thank you, Tina. We're right on track.
9 squirrels.
9 squirrels. And I'm pretty sure
that's almost a limit. Just almost a limit. One more. One more and we get a set of steak knives.
Well, I'm pretty sure at least one of those was a fox squirrel, though. I've boar hunted Spanish hog here also. Yeah, they're invasive. Hogs, let me tell you something about hogs. One, all hogs are invasive, whether they're living in a pigsty in a farmyard or they're living in the woods. They're all invasive. And none of them are from here. Well, I don't think they were. Maybe some of the little guys were, but
no,
they're
just javelinas.
Yeah, well, okay, just javelin. They're not really a pig.
Yeah, they're
okay.
Close cousin.
But yeah, they're terrible. They tear everything up. We've got them up here. They tried to figure out a way to get the populations down here because they destroy habitat. It's unbelievable what they can do in just a short time. I mean, they're like little bulldozers, and they can just rip through a wood patch. And the bad thing is we have them here in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is a very unique and protected biosphere or area, ecosphere, whatever you want to call it, or I don't know, whatever the proper term is these days. And there's boar and there pigs in there, and they really are tearing up and destroying some really unique and special areas in the park, and they do actively try to hunt those. And it's they're bad. I mean, they're just bad news all the way around. There's nothing good about pigs, and when you get right down to it, at least not here. And I think we can thank the Spaniards for that first, and probably where the ones in Florida came from originally, and then when in our country, my part of the country, years ago, up until the chestnut blight hit and all the chestnuts died, farmers just turned their pigs loose every year and marked their ears or whatever, so they kind of like branding them, so they knew which one. Then every fall they'd go round them up, either take them to market or they'd kill a few for the winter, and they just let them run loose in the woods all the time. That was easier than taking care of them, and they took care of themselves, I guess. But a lot of them stayed wild and they got bad. There's a lottery drawn each year for gator tags. If you're selected, you get the right to take 2. Is there a size limit, Mike? I knew some guys that used to hunt them once a year also. Don't know if that was the same system then, but I know they usually tried to get, big ones. For one thing, they could sell the hides, and the bigger the hide, the more they got for it. But and again, there was a time when they only let people go hunt nuisance gators. So if you had a gator in your golf course and he was eating all the chihuahuas and running golfers into the pond or out of the pond, that would be a gator that'd be targeted, and they'd send a guy in to get that gator. So I don't know how they do that now. but they're certainly everywhere down there. I mean, they are thick as thieves down that way. And I guess all along the coast and into Louisiana, I'm sure it's not just Florida. But I can remember when I was down there, you couldn't hunt them; they were still protected. And then that started changing as I before I left there, it was starting to relax just a little bit. And I don't know what year they opened it up more, but I will say this: that I did know a young man from Tennessee that was down there for a couple of years, and he did eat gator tail probably before that protection had been lifted. That's rumor I've heard. I don't know how true it was. What's Carol saying, Mike? That sounds exciting, but way too scary. Oh, gator bites. The larger, the more valuable they are. Yeah. Oh, it has to be over 6 feet. Okay. I knew a guy one time that hunted rattlesnakes down there, and they would do a roundup every year in certain areas. He lived near Jacksonville, and he could have been pulling my leg, I guess, but I never got that impression. But there was an island out in the St. Johns River area there that they call Rattlesnake Island because rattlesnakes will swim. And in fact, I've seen them do it. And it had some pretty big snakes on it. And they used to collect them, and anything over 10 feet, they would pay them for them for medical research. Back then, they were milking them, I suppose. Although a 10-foot rattlesnake is bigger than I want to milk. But some of those eastern diamondbacks can get huge. And Florida has some big ones. You don't hear much about that anymore. And it may be because there's not very many now. I don't know.
Yeah, they're in trouble.
They're in trouble here, and nobody talks about it. But like I said, I used to walk the woods every day on my job, and I never saw a rattlesnake or I did see a couple of copperheads. But you know how we are, and I've carried a stick with me all the time with a hook on the end of it when I was out in the woods, and I flipped rocks and logs and looked for stuff, and I still didn't find any. And all the time people were telling me, oh, that mountain over there is full of rattlesnakes. I saw 6 last week. And I'd go over there and I'd walk it, mark a boundary line or do something over there, and I'd never see the first one. And I was looking for them, and I never saw them. And, but it was, so I think they're in trouble in a lot of places. Habitat around here is just going away quickly for timber rattlers, and I just think timbers
are on the endangered species list in a lot of states now.
Yeah, they are. I don't think they are here yet, although they may be on a list of concerned species.
And then those eastern diamondbacks.
Do what?
I mean, the eastern diamondbacks, they're extirpated from North Carolina now.
Oh wow.
I know there's still some strongholds, but they're in trouble.
Yeah, Mike, the Everglades has a lot of issues with pythons. There's a couple of different species they're having trouble with down there, and they're really working hard to try to get rid of them too. I've heard stories. I knew somebody who was down there actually hunting some of those pythons, and or one of it was either pythons or an anaconda. But they were in that bit. I mean, they were in part of that effort to try to get rid of them. Florida is unfortunately a hotbed for exotic species and introduced species. I mean, everything from pretty birds like parakeets and other parrot. There's a couple of parrot species that live now down there and breed. And
monkeys.
There's a couple areas where there's monkeys down there now with populations breeding and expanding. The snake one is a huge problem in the Everglades. And I mean, some of these things are so big they eat the gators, which may or may not be a problem at this point. But I mean, they get that big, and it's really a problem. I mean, it's a perfect breeding ground for them. I had a discussion about that with somebody when I first started getting on the internet, and they lived down there. Oh, it was Lynn. Lynn project, and we were talking about. She didn't realize she had never really talked about that or heard anybody talk about it, and what a big problem that is down there. I knew a professor who was working on some of that when I was still in college, and even then it was starting to be a problem. And now they know they reproduce, and I've heard rumors that they're having a problem. And some, Mike, you can tell me if you've ever heard this since you're down there, but I've heard rumors that they're having some problems with cobras down there now in some areas. And again, that's the exotic pet trade. You never know what somebody's going to have. Mark can tell you about that. His cousin used to have a few interesting species in his house.
And if they get out, if there's a pair of them, that's all it takes.
That's all it takes. That's right. If they can survive. I mean, I don't know. Would Black Mamas live in Ohio through the winter? Probably.
I doubt it. I doubt it.
Well, that might be good, but in Florida, they would survive.
They would. And I've heard there's 2 species of cobras in the glades that they've at least found individuals. I don't know if they're reproducing or.
Well, let's hope not.
But yeah,
tell you what, Mike, I used to go to the glades, and like I said, these guys I knew were in the airboat business, and I guess some cases down there, if you drove an airboat, you were kind of like an outlaw, sort of like people that take their 4-wheelers and go places they're not supposed to up here. But these guys made fishing boats and hunting boats. That was a big thing down there. But you would go through the Everglades in a boat, and the grass is over your head. Even when you're setting up in a boat, the grass is still not even. Airboats you set up pretty high, or we did in those boats, and that's partly so you can see out over the grass. That it's literally a sea of grass down there, and it's pretty tall, and you're going through it, and it's laying over in front of you, and waving back and forth, and you look down at some point. And there's a lot of broken grass stems, laying in the bottom of the airboat. But there's also all these wiggly things down there crawling around in the boat. And I mean, it's just not full of snakes, but full of snakes. There's several down there. I even saw one climb up into the grate around the prop and get back into the prop and get chopped up because he tried to go out that way. But so what do you think if you're going through that grass and all of a sudden a 10-foot king cobra pops up and is looking at you right in the eye? I mean, that'd be scary, bad scary. Miami side of the Glades has had some cobras pop up. Yeah, well, that's not good. I hope, like Mark said, I hope they're not breeding pairs. It's amazing what people will do, and I can only guess that people have gotten cobras thinking that'd be a really cool pet, and then realize there ain't nothing cool about it and turn it loose. Because that's the humane thing to do, I knew a guy that ran the Kentucky Herpetarium. I guess that's the right name. And they did a lot of work with antivenoms and things like that. And he came down to UT and gave a lecture one night for the Wildlife Society. And he'd been working with dangerous snakes all of his life and had a couple of bad fingers to prove it. And he used to get phone calls from people wanting him to come out and catch a snake in their basement or something. And he got a call from somewhere up around Cincinnati, and the lady said, "There's a snake in my basement." And he went down there to get it, and it turned out to be a cobra. And that was in Ohio. So
lovely.
Well, Tina, you never know. Some people
think they're cool.
Mark, I'm not picking on Mark's cousin, but he had a black mamba or a pair or something. I don't know. But I mean, because you could get them in Ohio, and it was kind of a cool snake to have. There certainly wasn't any more around, but you could buy stuff like that up there. And
which is ridiculous.
And I've had snakes, and I know Mark's had poisonous snakes, and he had a friend that had all kinds of snakes, and an occasional rattlesnake might be in the house. Or not in the house, but in the house.
In the house.
Okay, in the house. And
in the terrarium.
In the terrarium, yeah, in the house. So I mean but then again, he studied snakes, so I mean that was kind of his thing. So I can kind of get that, but it's amazing what people think is cool. I mean, you can almost say, okay, I can see somebody wants a pet tiger because it's warm and cuddly, warm and fuzzy. A snake is not. But even a pet tiger, there's no such thing to me as a pet tiger. I mean, it's either a tiger or it ain't. And, it's going to it can turn on you just as quick as a cobra can. And you just never know. And people are just not right when they think about stuff like that. They don't think it through. That's why the anacondas or the pythons are such a big problem in Florida. Is people got them and they thought they were really cool when they were about this big, and then they kept growing and growing and growing, and then they got a 15-foot reticulated python in their bathroom, and they don't know what to do with it. So, well, let's just let him loose. He'll be fine here. And they think that's the right thing to do sometimes, and it's the worst thing you could ever do. Yeah, okay. I can remember when pet stores used to sell caimans. And if anybody doesn't know, a caiman is like a small gator. It's a South American crocodilian. I guess crocodilian. That actually, I think they're endangered now in some places. Some people love reptiles, but Tina says, but to me, anything dangerous and wild belongs in the wild. Yeah, it does. I mean, I've had snakes. We had snakes with my kids. I didn't have any poisonous snakes. We had some black snakes. We've had some king snakes. My kids grew up knowing what snakes were, and they handled snakes. But in fact, I have two girls, and they used to bring them to me all the time and say, look at this. What is this, Dad? And drove my mother to distraction because she just knew they were going to grab a copperhead or a rattlesnake one day. And I could not get her to understand that I'd taught them the difference between those snakes, and they weren't going to grab a rattlesnake or a copperhead. But to her, all snakes were copperheads or rattlesnakes. So even the black ones. She had a guy working out on the highway one day mowing the sides of the road. And she went out in the road and stopped him on a tractor and got him to come up to the house because there was about a 6-foot black rat snake crawled out of the garage at our house. And she had him chop its head off with a hoe. Broke the hoe, I might add. Which only goes to show you that hoes were really created to kill snakes all along. You have garter snakes. People just refuse to think. I missed something else. Me too, but we have garter snakes. Garter snakes are, they're not quite the same thing as a cobra or a python. Well, guys, it's 1:00. We have burned another, as the car guys used to say, you wasted another 3 hours with me and Mark here today. But I love you for it. And if you hadn't hit that like button and subscribe button, I'd please wish you'd give me the thought or give us the thought and, consider doing it. And we'll be back here again next week. I don't know what we'll be talking about next week, or I will be if Mark's not here. And Kay says she would love a pet tiger, but I know I can't provide the type of habitat it would need. That's right. And I can't come up with about 30 pounds of meat a day. Yeah, that's always an issue. And honestly, you see that most of those animals do not do well in captivity, even if it's not obvious. And it shortens their lifespans I knew a lady that had to rehab wolves, and she did it legally and as a profession. And when you had a wolf in captivity, they just were not happy. They paced constantly. They just like lions and tigers do when they're in cages. What, Spook? Speaking of lions and tigers, oh my, here's the old man. Anyway, I better let folks go. I haven't had a lot of sleep. I was up at 3 a.m. this morning with stomach issues, and I haven't really gone back to sleep yet. I decided I'd just sit here and put together those slides I had earlier, and I have not been to bed, so I may take a nap this afternoon. I'm going to call Old Man Privilege and take one if I feel like it. I got bluebirds on my feeder.
Really?
Yep. A male and a female, looks like. I need to put up some boxes just in case. Anyway, that was a squirrel. In this case, it was a bird. I've had a great time. Thanks for coming in, Mike, and everybody for coming by, and really appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed some part of what we've discussed today. It was all Mark and I laugh a lot and we talk about it a lot, but we have a lot of fun together when we did these things. It may not sound exciting, but if you'd been there, it would have been exciting. Just like if you'd been in that canoe that day and rolled over in the Clinch River, it would have been exciting. If nothing else, because the Clinch River in the middle of summer is still only about 40 degrees. So that always makes it exciting. 10. All right, stop counting. 10 squirrels. I'm pretty sure that's the legal limit. I'll have to write that down and keep track.
That's it. Full limit.
How many we get here before it's over with. Well, it depends on for your squirrels or my squirrels. I don't know what the legal, what we can have together. I'll have to look that up.
Well, here you can kill 10.
And what are oh, see, there's a whole nother topic.
There we go. No.
What species are you killing out there?
Fox squirrels and red squirrels.
Okay, so little reds and the pine or whatever you call them out there.
Yeah,
and fox squirrels. Okay,
which are introduced, but another squirrel. There you go.
There you go. More introductions. All right, guys. Love y'all. Thanks for being here. Everybody keep Dean in your thoughts. He's, they're working through a lot in his family. I'm sure it's tough. Been there, done that. It is tough. And he's going to go to bed, I think. He just tucked his head in. Oh, no. I said stop counting. Anyway, so see everybody next week. If the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise, I'll be right back here again. And see you later. Have a good day, everybody.